Good morning, everybody, and it gives me great pleasure to welcome you all here to the O'Reilly Hall for our annual training day, our National Training Day. And I would very much like to thank all of the organisations who have put a lot of work into helping organise today's programme. So any of you who were with us last year will know that last year we partnered with ISMO to run this event. And for this year, we really wanted to expand it out across the other disciplines. So we're very proud to say that we've had great interaction, not only from ISMO medical oncologist, but also from our haematology colleagues, radiation oncology colleagues, and of course our surgeons through the RCSI. And we also have representation here at HSCP level on our programme. So I would also sincerely like to thank our sponsors because, as you know, without sponsorship we cannot run these events. So huge thanks to AstraZeneca, BMS, Daiichi Sankyo, and of course Regeneron. So thank you, and thank you for taking the time to be with us today. So to begin with, I would really like to call out our organising committee. They've put so much work into organising this. Everybody has been vital. I would, however, I know nobody ever likes being singled out, but I would really like to single out Claire Hopkins, who has just been phenomenal with all the organisation. She did all of the work this year, very kindly took it on in relation to managing all of the abstract submissions. We had a great response to our call for abstracts with over 88 trainees submitting abstracts, 20 of whom will be presenting orally today, and the remainder have posters. And we do hope that you will take time during lunchtime to view the posters, because a lot of work goes into both the oral and the poster presentations. So without further ado, it is my great pleasure to introduce Professor Brendan Kelly. And Professor Brendan Kelly is a Professor of Psychiatry at Trinity College Dublin, and he also works in Tallaght University Hospital. So Brendan, welcome to the stage, and Brendan will present on self-care and work-life balance. Thank you. Thank you so much.
Great. Thank you very much indeed for inviting me along and for the warm welcome. My name is Brendan Kelly. I'm a psychiatrist in Tallaght Hospital, Professor of Psychiatry at Trinity, and I'm very happy to be here speaking to you, to such an august audience. I told my wife as I left the house this morning I was coming to this meeting and that this was a very educated, clinical, august grouping, and I told her that never in her wildest dreams did she think I would be speaking to such a group. Never in her wildest dreams. And my wife looked at me, she said, "Oh honey, you're not even in my wildest dreams." Nevertheless, I will proceed. And look, you know, when you talk about work-life balance and stress and burnout, the traditional talk would be to present statistics saying levels of burnout and stress are very high and give you advice about managing it. I'm going to presume you know that kind of thing and take a slightly different approach this morning. I want to talk generally about mental health and finish with some advice about managing it. But I want to go broad, if I may, to begin with, and talk a little bit about mental health, some facts and figures. And the fundamental message today is that almost everything you are told about mental health in the media in general is wrong. Pretty much everything. I'm going to talk a tiny bit about social media, because people who are not obsessed with actual social media are obsessed with its imagined effects on mental health. And then I'll finish with some take-home points, because you need something to take home. A talk is like a children's party. Everyone needs to go home with something. So I'm going to give you a few bullet points you can stick up on the fridge. Look, according to the World Health Organization, health is a state of complete physical, mental, and social well-being, and not merely the absence of disease. So I'm not certain how many of you this morning are in a state of complete physical, mental, and social well-being. I imagine very few of us are. Mental health is even more demanding, a state of well-being in which you realize your own abilities, you can cope with the normal stresses, work productively, and make a contribution. Again, we are setting the bar very high here for mental health. Most of us aim to get through the day with minimal damage to ourselves and others and to get home in the evening. This is a very idealistic definition. It's useful, I guess, but I would suggest we will leave that behind us for the rest of today. I'm a psychiatrist, so I'm going to talk to you about some things that people find a little difficult. Anxiety, depression, self-harm, and suicide. I'm going to present some statistics about these in the interests of understanding them better and understanding what's really going on in the world. So look, if it's upsetting or something, just tune out for a few minutes if these are difficult topics for you. I remember once when I was going to give a talk when I was a junior doctor, and I said to the consultant, look, I'm worried I'll make a mistake, or I'm worried I'll upset people by talking about things. And he was a very wise man. He said, don't worry about making a mistake or upsetting people. Don't worry. Always remember, 95% of people are not listening. He said, so never worry. So look, tune out if you want to. I like to stand back in the torrent of negative news stories about mental health and well-being. I like to stand back and look at the big picture and look at things that really matter. So, are we happy? Is anyone here today happy? And how would you know, or how would you measure it? Traditionally, happiness is measured on a scale from 0 to 10, where 10 is very happy, 0 is very unhappy. Now, this is a very simple way of measuring happiness, but you got to measure it somehow if you're going to go around the place measuring it. And does anyone know the happiest country in the world? Okay, no seems to be the answer to that question. It is always Finland. Now, this does not mean we all move to Finland, because if we did that, we would bring our unhappiness with us. It means if we had been born in Finland, things would be a whole lot better. But this is not so much to do with individuals. The most unhappy country in the world inevitably is Afghanistan. Finland, people rate themselves 7 or 8 out of 10. Afghanistan, the most common answer is 2 or 3. So the measure isn't great, but that does mean something, if you know what I mean. It is quite a different country socially, economically, if people say their happiness is very low. So in this scale from 1 to 147, Ireland always comes in around here, pretty high. We are pretty happy. If I asked you how happy are you, most of you would say 7 out of 10. A few of you would say 8 out of 10, and then someone, just to get attention, would say 10 out of 10. So I'm not going to do that this morning. It's the same every time. What's important about Ireland is not so much that we're number 15. Far more important is that we're... So this is what really matters. All right. So look, that's general well-being, and it turns out we're not too bad. Let's go to the other end of the spectrum. And I'm very interested in rates of self-harm and rates of suicide. And when I ask groups, is suicide increasing or decreasing, what is your answer to that question? Going up or going down? Okay, you're going to be a little uncertain because of what I'm saying here. We'll get to that in a moment. Here's some really interesting numbers about anxiety and depression. And you can see the people who report ever having been anxious or depressed in the world. It's pretty high there. But you can see Ireland, contrary to what we tell ourselves, we're very average. Okay, in the number of people who say they had significant problems with anxiety, depression, more than they could cope with, say, using their normal mechanisms. We're a little lower than the world average, but broadly speaking, we are the same as Finland in this regard. What about self-harm? This is a non-fatal self-harm. This is a topic of huge interest, obviously. And when we look at our rates of self-harm here in Ireland in 2022, we had about 197 presentations per 100,000 population, the same in 2023. But overall, this has decreased significantly and continues to fall. And this is among everyone, including younger adults. we are seeing reduced rates of self-harm presenting to hospitals. If we look globally at rates of suicide from 2000 to 2021, which is the last year for which there are very reliable figures, we can see the world is experiencing a huge decline in suicide. I used to call this one of the biggest public health shifts of our lifetime. I really liked that line, but then COVID came along and it took it from me. So this is the second biggest public health shift of our lifetime, a decline in the rate of suicide in the world and in Europe, very steadily, particularly among women. The rate of suicide among women globally has fallen by 50% in the past 25 years. So an extraordinary decline. Even as reporting improves, by the way, the rate is falling. In Ireland, we are pretty much on trend with a 35% decline in suicide in Ireland, particularly among women, over the past, since around 2000. Now, when I say this, I want to be absolutely clear that I'm not in any way sort of reducing the magnitude of the problem or the difficulty. Even one suicide is one too many, and in any audience there will be people whose lives have been affected by losing a friend or a family member. So I am not saying this problem is solved, but rather that positive change is possible and happening. And a sense of defeatism is particularly regrettable when positive change can happen and is happening in so many countries around the world, including Ireland. So when you look at a global decline by around a third or a half in women, one country in the world, one big, and I would have to say rather loud, country is going in the opposite direction to this. Can anyone guess which country is going perfectly opposite to this trend? The United States. I'm going to show you some more numbers here. Here's the UK, which is more or less steady, if we're honest. But the US, the rate is increasing. The reason this doesn't shift global numbers is the US, even though it's very prominent, it has about 4% of the world's population. So the overall global figure absorbs the US increase and still shows a large decrease. My final point on this will be to ask for a one-word explanation about why the US is so different in relation to suicide. And okay, it does not begin with the letter T, okay? Can we please just stop being obsessed for a moment? A one-word explanation for why the US is so incredibly different in all of its statistics about self-harm. Guns. Guns change everything. And look, my last statistic for you on this is that US gun deaths, 2/3 of them are suicide and 1/3 homicide. So each time we hear about gun deaths in the US and homicides, remember there's twice as many gun suicides as there are gun homicides in the US. And that is a very, very compelling argument for gun control, obviously. But big message here today, suicide rate falling globally and in Ireland, including among young people, and across Europe. Again, to emphasize, even one death by suicide is too many, and we can do better. This shows it is possible. The final myth is that we take lots of medication in Ireland. You might know that we don't. Our rates of antidepressant and sedative medication use are kind of average or low. But nevertheless, every small, poorly conducted study that finds different will grab the headlines. But systematic data show we are very average. What happened during COVID to our happiness? This is Ireland, 7.9 out of 10 happiness in 2003. A little bit of dip during the financial problems in 2012, down to 6.8 out of 10. This is Ireland's happiness rate. And then along comes COVID. And anyone guess how low our happiness went in 2021? COVID comes along, people sick, quarantining, all kinds of stuff. It barely impacted. Absolutely fascinating. Again, what we find during times like this is self-harm declines and suicide declines, and the impact on happiness tends not to be what you would expect. I wrote an entire book about this, which I think literally nobody read. I sent it to my mum, right? And my mum says she reads my books, but I've slipped in some test questions into conversations, and unfortunately the news for me is not good. So literally nobody, it would seem, read that one. Before I finish, I want to talk a tiny bit about social media, because those who are not obsessed with actual social media are essentially obsessed with its effects on mental health, if any. And I'm interested historically in our panics about things. So look, a striking feature of the present age is that it is one of incessant mental activity. All is hurry, bustle, and excitement. There is an amount of brain work going on in the present age far different in kind and far greater than any that was ever known. Okay, so this person is saying that the new technology is exponentially worse than other generations. Okay, that what we're having now is completely different to anything that ever came before. Is it necessary to prove the greater the activity of the brain, the greater the liability to disease? So this quote is from 1875 from this rather excellent looking asylum doctor, James Duncan, and he's talking about steam power. And this is one of the clearest demonstrations of our constant belief that this generation's technology is vastly worse than anything that ever came before. Here's another one. This technology is the latest cultural emergent to invade the privacy of the home. Parents are unprepared, frightened, resentful, helpless. No locks can keep this intruder out. Parents cannot shut their children away from it. The most serious complaint is it interferes with other activities, particularly family conversation at the dinner table and group activities. So what is this evil technology creeping into people's homes? 1935, she is writing about radio. The worst technology ever, because it can sneak into the house kind of through the air and you don't know the children are listening to it, with the result that family conversation suffers and families are ripped apart by radio. So look, reforms by their advances, new gadgets are impressive, but in the long run they're dubious. They by no means increase the contentment or the happiness of people. And this description says technology is a deceptive sweetening, like speedier communications, which unpleasantly accelerate the tempo of life and leave us with less time. This, 1962, comes from Carl Jung, and he's basically talking about all communication technology, which I think we'll all agree all makes everything worse. And that was apparent back in the 1960s. This is a lovely paper for those of you who want to read it about panics, the Sisyphean cycle of techno-panics, and it's a really nice one to look up because it describes perfectly what's happening with social media. However, let us ask ourselves, is in fact this generation's technology vastly worse than anything we've seen before? We have always believed that, but maybe it's true this time round. We've always believed it was true, but is it? Here's a really nice study looking at restrictive mobile phone policies in schools. And this looked at schools with restrictive policies and those without, and found there is no evidence at all that restrictive mobile phone policies in school improve mental health or reduce screen time. Okay, so that makes no difference at all. It shifts screen time into the evenings. But what's happening with young people then? Well, there's more screen time and more social media over the past, say, 20 years when this has really come into our lives. But at the same time, young people are participating in more weekly sports than ever in the history of the country. This has skyrocketed in the past 20 years at the same time that phones and social media entered young people's lives. There has never been more participation in group sports among the population, but particularly among young people. Deliberate self-harm has fallen at the same time these technologies came. And when you look at the statistics on suicide in the under 24s, we see a 22% reduction in the past 10 years or so alone. Even one suicide is one too many. I cannot emphasize that enough. But all indicators are that mental health in young people is not declining. And even when you look at the loneliness, people are very fond of talking about loneliness epidemics. When you look at the Central Statistics Office study of young adults, what percent do you imagine are lonely always or often? It's less than 5%. Again, small, poorly conducted studies grab the headlines. So, okay, let's not worry so much about social media in that case and only look at the totality of young people's lives where the key indicators are getting better. All of them. Take-home points. Look, I'm supposed to be talking about self-care, so I better do a bit of that. For you, self-care is important. I know you wanted me to say more apart from putting the word self-care on the screen, but there it is. One of the neglected aspects of self-care is being anchored in purpose. And a lot of people struggle to find purpose. Now look, I don't want to sort of be ingratiating myself to all of you, but you're doing cancer trials, right? It is hard to think of something that more automatically brings purpose into a life. And that's something you're going to take for granted over the coming years. It's just what you do. But it's sometimes talking to people who work in other disciplines, they sometimes will say, you know, you're lucky. You know what you're doing either matters or might matter. Whereas people working in other areas don't have that automatic bedrock of meaning, if you like. So don't forget that bit. Being anchored in purpose is more powerful than we think, and you're likely to forget it when it's baked into your day job. So that's really important. Reconnecting with that is good. In terms of general mental health tips, we all need to get more sleep. We need to eat properly. This is the scientist Michael Pollan, who has written a lot of things about a lot of things, but I'm going to focus on one aspect, which is his 7-word dietary advice. Honestly, I think it pretty much captures everything. Eat food. This is really important for those of you who attend gyms obsessively and only eat powder. That doesn't work. That is not good for you. Not too much food and mostly plants. Physical exercise matters, obviously. 30 minutes 5 times a week is the guidance. If you're doing more than that, I have no idea why. Okay, it does not seem to produce much benefit. I hope you have a private reason, because there ain't no systematic reason for much more than that. Staying connected socially and managing the various stressors. Now look, managing the stressors in life, I guess we would all like to be like this monk here sitting in a state of bliss, which we probably won't achieve, any of us, or practicing our mindfulness, which is really, really good for some people, and I'm a big fan of mindfulness, but it's not for everybody, you know. Mandatory mindfulness courses just don't work. And most people have something else in their lives that is mentally nourishing. And my final practical piece of advice to you today is to identify that thing in your life that already is mentally nourishing. So look, in an ideal world, it would be something like running on the beach at dawn or stuff like that, but it mightn't be. So something like gardening, say, where you start it for an hour and without noticing 2 hours have gone past and you're in this state of flow. Or swimming is a particularly good one for this because it does take you out of your over-cognitive mind. It kind of has this obligatory effect on your body, and you know it gets you out of the thinking loops. And another one, I was doing a talk about this, and a woman came up at the end and said I was wrong about mindfulness, and people needed to do knitting. Now, knitting is a really good one because it is absorbing and it allows thoughts just to flow away. So I have included a deliberately non-traditional picture of knitting in order to indicate that knitting is for all. Okay, so that's the end of my advice. I'm just going to return very briefly to my old friend Duncan and say we're falling into a trap of blaming technology for everything and projecting aspects of human nature onto our phones and things like this. And what he wrote about steam power was the evil arising from the technology comes not from the the contrivance in the abstract, but abuses with their working and incidental to their introduction. And even if it were possible to get rid of the technology that we now complain about, none of us would want to. The benefits are too great. We would not be willing to give up the advantages we currently enjoy. So maybe rather than blaming our phones for everything that's wrong in the world and constantly pathologizing a generation of young people who appear to be in far better mental health than I was at that time, maybe it's time to step back from that kind of criticism a little bit. So today I wanted to define mental health, give you some facts and figures, talk a tiny bit about social media, which I think I did, and give you some take-home points. I like this quote. I'm going to leave you with it. Thoreau probably never said it, but we're just going to roll with it now because the internet says that he did. Happiness is like a butterfly. The more you chase it, the more it will elude you. But if you turn your attention to other things, that's becoming absorbed in the gardening, the knitting, the walking, whatever, it will come and sit softly on your shoulder. That is to make you happy. Now, to make me happy, I have my slides are stuck at this critical moment. So to make me happy, I have a series of books I was about to show to say that you can buy them. However, it seems the gods have intervened and stalled my slides. They might pop up now in a minute again, but they seem to be broken. So look, that's all I have to say. Thank you very much for you listening. And I don't know, do we do questions, do we? No. We have. Okay. Oh, look, there we go. The Science of Happiness meditation book, and the other one, the red one, is actually free to download, which is why I'm allowed to mention it. I'm strictly not allowed to mention the others, which you have to buy. So thank you very much for listening, and I hope you have a good day. Okay, so I'm told we've time for one question. Is that it? Wow. How do we pick one question? Well, maybe there'll be no questions and then we won't have a dilemma, Angela. How about that? Does anyone have a question or an observation or ideally an angry contradiction, which I always enjoy? Yes, one person has one question. You can say it to me and I'll repeat it out loud if the mic doesn't get to you.
Thanks, that was really interesting. I'm just wondering, do we know why mental health or suicide rates are dropping, or mental health is improving?
Why? Yeah, okay, so do we know why mental health is improving or suicide rates are dropping? So very, very briefly, because generally speaking, there are fewer people in extreme poverty in the world, general mental health is improving. The biggest impact on suicide is restricting access to means. And the biggest drop in any population group is among women in Southeast Asian countries, where the governments, just over 10 years ago, simply banned high toxic pesticides. That is the thing that works. Because if we think about suicide, completed suicide as someone with a low mood and an impulse, we need to address both things, but the quickest thing is to address the impulse. And the dramatic reductions in female suicide, way more than 50% in Southeast Asian countries, has been restricting access to really high potency pesticides and fertilizers and things like this in rural areas. So not very exciting, not technology based, but really, really important. And I guess I will leave you with this thought. Any of you who know someone who died by suicide or whose families are affected by it, just imagine that if we could have done something really simple that would have prevented that happening. The power of that is extraordinary. So thank you for your question and thank you for your attention.
Thank you so much, Brendan. That was really absolutely excellent. Small change to our programme. We have Professor Jarushka Naidoo, who is going to speak ahead of the trainee presentations. And just directly after this, if the trainees who are presenting orally could please position themselves in the front, it will just save time because it's a quick fire session, as you all know. So, quick introduction. Jarushka doesn't really need an introduction. You are all, I'm sure, very familiar with her. But for those of you who may not have had the privilege of meeting her before, Jarushka is a consultant medical oncologist, full professor at the Beaumont RCSI Cancer Centre. She's also chair of our Cancer Trials Ireland Lung DSSG, and she's has an adjunct faculty at Johns Hopkins. So you're very welcome, Jarushka, and thank you for taking the time this morning. Thank you.
Thanks, Angela. Thanks for the opportunity to speak. And as a South Asian woman from a rural area, obviously moving to Ireland saved me. So good to hear that. And thanks to the organizing committee for the opportunity to speak today. So I'm going to talk about addressing barriers and engaging with research, which is a little bit of an adaptation of the topic. Just a bit of disclosure. I understand that there are people in the audience who have had a far longer and more illustrious career than I have, and have probably addressed or thought about these barriers before me. So this is just my humble opinion and my humble thoughts on this. And of course, also happy to take positive comments, angry questions at the end. And forgive me for some of these thoughts, but these are the personal ways of thinking about things that I think have helped me and potentially may help you. So first question, why should we address barriers to research at all? Is this important to medicine? And why is it important to medicine? So first of all, research is actually the basis of everything we do in clinical care. Based on this concept of evidence-based medicine that was brought forward in the early 90s, the reasons why we make decisions for our patients or bring forward innovation in healthcare is based on three fundamental principles: patient preferences, clinician expertise, and the best research available. If we just go by expertise, we see that is the very lowest level of information on which we can base our decisions. This is the first important reason. The second is, and particularly oncology, we see how research changes the standard of care in real time. In the short time that I've been a medical oncologist focused on lung cancer, just in the last 3 years, we have seen this practice-changing trial, Keynote 671, showing an OS benefit for neoadjuvant therapy in lung cancer. Neoadjuvant therapy was not a thing in lung cancer. It wasn't even on the horizon. But yet, in 3 years, it has completely changed what we do and has changed our guidelines. So we can see that research improves clinical outcomes. The second is, this isn't just about outcomes. It's not the only thing that's important to patients. Research also has a key role in improving the safety of interventions or understanding how they work. And this is a New England paper from several years ago, a very simple question of intervening on simple hospital-acquired infections. And this randomized trial was published in the New England because it improves the safety of a simple intervention in all hospitalized patients. And then lastly, and unfortunately very relevant to our context, sometimes research is the only way we can access new treatments for our patients. This is a very good example of a clinical trial that was open in the lung cancer DSSG until a couple of years ago, led by Sinead Cuff and St. James's, the Accelerate trial of a new RET inhibitor for patients with RET-altered non-small cell lung cancer. This was the only way we had access to RET inhibitors in this country, and it is still the only way we have access. We still don't have access to these agents. So sometimes research is our way to gain expertise and hopefully gain a through road into some of these new treatments. So what are some of the barriers? Why are we finding that engaging with research, particularly in oncology, is more different or more difficult? I think what we realize colloquially, but sometimes don't have the data to represent, is that clinical trials have become more complex. And this is a beautiful paper in Science Reports last year, which tried to put some shape on this by taking 16,000 clinical trials across different disciplines and using a machine learning model to identify what they called a complexity score, meaning what are the different requirements for patients to get on a clinical trial or access a trial. For example, the number of eligibility criteria, the arms on a trial, the endpoints, the sites involved, and of course, the thing that absolutely kills our program manager, Keith, and our team, the biomarker requirements. These are all hoops that our patients, our study teams, and PIs have to collectively jump in order for a patient to get onto a trial. And what we see in this analysis is with this crude score, cancer trials are exponentially more complex than any other medical specialty or even surgical specialty, with a mean score of 80%, where other specialties like cardiology, dermatology, even neurology are around 40%. So what does this mean for us as the practitioners who are doing trials? It means we have to be very sophisticated in our approach. We have to have sophisticated, high-quality study teams who are educated in all these areas. We have to be able to jump these hoops very quickly, because in patients with lung cancer, within 2 weeks, their PS will decline and they will never get on a trial. So within about 30 seconds, you should be able to assess all of this, know if your patient is eligible, and put them on a trial. So that's a very difficult skill to be able to develop. And I guess, how do you develop that? How do you become very good at that? And what are the ways you can do to empower yourself to be that kind of PI or that kind of member of the study team? So I think when we think about barriers to research, this is sort of the classic trope. You know, you're getting ready for your race, you're running a race, you're going to jump those hurdles. What are the hurdles? So the traditional hurdles: funding, paperwork, and research or protected time. While I think these are relevant, I think the issues are they are external or they're systemic. And we as PIs or study teams can feel quite removed from that. Oh, the reason I can't do this is because some committee said I can't do it. I would change the conversation and say that in any race, what is more relevant is the person running the race. And a little bit like the previous talk, what drives you? Why are you running in the first place? How fast do you run? How do you train? Why should you be running this race? Maybe you'd be a better rugby player. I think you have to think about those things to understand why you're there, and that is what will sustain you. And the second thing is, what is the race? What are you trying to learn? How are you going to get faster? And more important, what is the finish line? What is your goal? What are you trying to achieve? Because that is the fire that's going to keep you going. So I would change the conversation and think about a different paradigm, a little bit like a tree in the forest. What are the internal or individual barriers? What are the things you can do as the PI or the study team member or the patient advocate to try to change the conversation and make this happen? So I would say the first thing is your roots, which is a little bit like purpose. Who are you? Why are you here? Why are you doing this? The second is culture. What are the nutrients in the soil? What is sustaining you? Who is sustaining you and how? And the third thing is the environment. Is this an environment that sustains and supports the larger ecosystem and all the trees around you? And what are those trees saying, and how do the roots interact with each other? Because it all matters. So first of all, the environment. I think this is a key feature or a key barrier. So what is a research environment? Where does research thrive? And what makes it thrive? So a research environment is where research is conducted well. And some seminal papers have shown that the 5 key features of a research environment is access to data or science, trust, belief in innovation, in doing something new, collaboration, people who work together, and people who are motivated. So it's the people, the resources, and how those people use their resources. More importantly, what's the barrier here? What stifles this? Bureaucracy, hierarchy. I'm the boss. I'm the only one who can have the best idea. No. Sometimes the best idea comes from the youngest person, if your ears are open. Funding scarcity and excess workload. This is a great book that I think sort of summarizes this, and there's a great saying in this book: you do not rise to the level of your goals, you fall to the level of your systems. So what is your system, and how do you generate a system? So I think the trope here is that research does not thrive by accident in a clinical-only environment. You have to develop a system. You have to build a research environment. So practically speaking, what does that mean? What does that mean for you and me, the PIs and the study team? So first of all, find your people. Who are the people who are interested in this? Find 1 to 2 colleagues who are curious, who are ambitious. Number 2, create shared activity. Create a journal club. Create trial meetings. Go to teaching. Ask questions in teaching. And create your own system. Have 1 regular meeting with 1 motivated collaborator every week. Be intentional, and if you build it, they will come to you. So what are you going to do on Monday morning? You're going to find 1 person who shares your passion, and you're going to schedule that recurring meeting. The second barrier, I feel, is research culture. So what is culture? Culture is your values and actions that are aligned with your values. So what are the values of a researcher? A researcher is someone who constantly wants to learn, who's curious, who can handle uncertainty, who is rigorous about detail, who wants to produce high-quality outputs, and who challenges the status quo. So it's what people talk about, what they care about, and what they reward. What are the things that perhaps go against this? Fear of failure. This is a very difficult thing in high achievers. We don't want to look weak. There is no weakness. There is only learning. Ego, a fixed mindset. No, that's not how we do things here. Maybe it's how we do things here now. Think a little bit about how to approach that. That's a very, very tricky skill to develop. And this is a great saying by Peter Drucker, culture eats strategy for breakfast. So you can actually have a very good idea, have a very good plan, but if you don't have the nutrients in the soil, it's very difficult to sustain. So I think the summary there is research cannot thrive if curiosity is not safe or not visible. So what's the solution? The runner needs to be a curious person, full of ideas and full of can-dos. And how do you do that? You share ideas, you talk about your ideas, you create dialogue with others, and you ask thoughtful questions. So what are you going to do on Monday morning? You're going to share a new research idea with someone who is aligned with you. And then the last thing, which I think is probably the most important thing and aligns with the previous talk, is the self. So knowing your roots. Why do you want to do this? Why are you on this race? What questions do you have and what do you hope to add? And this is what I sometimes call the fire. I can see the fire when I meet someone, and I don't really know what that means, but I think when you see it, you know it. And I think what this is it's what drives people and what their best self looks like. What stifles this? What's the real barrier? Imposter syndrome. Oh, I have the fire, but is it real? Maybe they're going to find out there's no fire. It's fake fire. It's not a fake fire. It's not. And a good mentor sees that, and the people who really care will see that. Self-doubt, risk aversion, and peer pressure. Oh, no, we don't do that now. Everybody does this path. But what's your path? And it's okay if your path looks a little bit different. A really good book that encapsulates this is actually a business book by a very famous business author called Jim Collins, who wrote this idea or came up with this idea of the hedgehog and the fox. Are you a hedgehog or are you a fox? The fox knows many things and tries to do many things at the same time, whereas the hedgehog knows one thing and focuses on that thing and tries to focus their effort. So in terms of your roots, what's the actual barrier here? The barrier is that the research cannot last if it does not fit who you are and how you live. So I think some of the motivations that will help develop a researcher is not to treat it like it's the 10th item on the to-do list. Not to do it because of external pressure. Oh, I have to do research because, everybody has to do research. That's not the sign of a real researcher. A transactional mindset. Oh, I need to have 5 papers in order to get the SPR interview. No. Only be in it if you want to do it. And is your heart truly in it? Are you sort of driven by it? Is this something you want to add? So what are some of the motivations that sustain genuine love of the game? That even when you've taken many hits, because you just love the game, you want to keep playing. Curiosity, I have questions. Ownership, not only do I have questions, I feel like this is my question. And growth mindset, I think this is important, that you don't see failing as failing. Failing is actually learning, because you will never learn unless there is some gap that needs to be filled. So on Monday morning, what's the question that you should ask yourself? I would say, what question do I genuinely care about, and how do I bring that forward? And this is the only side where I think there should be a second portion to it, is it's not just about who you are, it's also about how you live and who's around you. And I would say, by far, the number one enabler of my life is my spouse. I think he read me within about 30 seconds of meeting me. And I think it's very important to be very honest with them and to say, well, this is who I am, and this is what it entails. I hope you're on the ship, and what that means. And thankfully, I'm very lucky. This works out. I think your colleagues are a part of that. I think there are lots of different parts to our jobs, and if you have identified yourself as this, and you add value, you add nutrients to the soil, they will help to support the other tasks to make us collectively successful. Your fellow researchers are the same, as well as existing new researchers. So again, I would change the conversation saying, magically remove those barriers. Don't really even think about the barriers. Rather think about what's the accelerators. What's going to make you just jump over those barriers like they don't even exist? And these, I think, are the 4 things that are important. The first and unequivocally most important thing is mentorship. So what does a mentor do? A mentor is somebody who opens doors for you, who's a bit senior to you in some way, sees obstacles before you, and helps to create new paths either through or around it. And these are just a smattering of my mentors that have helped me through various stages. I think there's different types of mentor that serve different purposes. There's a classic academic mentor that gives you opportunity, ideas. There's a process mentor who helps you figure out how to get around that corner. And then there's the peer mentor or friend-tor, someone you can just level with. Yes, I know, and Ken has moved to the lower one because he practically lives in my phone. But I think that, people can move through these different stages, and I think that it's very important to have this ecosystem of people supporting you. I think mentorship as well is also a lifelong quest, so it's important to be a lifelong mentee. And, this sort of focus needs to fulfill a clinical need. So as Angela indicated, the lung cancer portfolio, unfortunately, when I arrived, we only had 1 open clinical trial because this was in the middle of COVID. So I think trying to make sure that your questions meet the needs of patients is absolutely fundamental. It will help to build that fire and that drive. And the process through this, and I got, lots of input from different people on how to do this. The first question always is to understand your population and what are their needs. So we looked at the genomic landscape of lung cancer in Ireland. We identified that patients, there's a high rate of KRAS mutant lung cancer. We talked to all the PIs and found their interests. We developed collaborations across Europe through ETOP and ECOG Akron. And with this is what the lung cancer clinical trial portfolio looks like now. Through the collective efforts of all the PIs, we now have over 16 open clinical trials. And I think that this is a testament to the focus of the collective group. And of course, these trials are open across the country. I think the 4th important element or accelerator to a new PI is the ability to mobilize resource. I think most people think that you have to just be a good grant writer, that it's old-fashioned grant writing. It isn't always. You can use your interpersonal skills to develop alliances, strategic partnerships. This is what we did with our partnership with the Irish Cancer Society, and we did write some old-fashioned grants as well. And this has been transformative for lung cancer in Ireland. We've seen here that with that money, we have developed cross-disciplinary collaborations to run Ireland's first lung cancer screening pilot, and thank you to Angela for her support with that. My PhD fellow, David O'Reilly, has run a liquid biopsy pilot with our colleagues in diagnostic pathology, and we've even supported our GP colleagues in developing new clinical trials. And I think the last and probably most important accelerator is the ability to create community through this, that these are ties that bind. Because research, when done well, or even when done at all, builds bridges and is deeply rewarding. It's an opportunity to grow as a professional and to grow with your community. It's an opportunity to shape your field, shape the people around you, and shape how they think. And lastly, and most importantly, this is a fundamental tenet of medicine. And I think it is a very noble tradition to continue. And I hope many of you will continue it with me and with others in the room. Thank you. I'm sure I ran over there a little bit. Maybe we can take one question if there are questions. I think we have one here.
Thank you, Prof. Jarushka, for this nice presentation. I was just wondering, what's your input into those barriers? Would you think that they have helped improve the outcome of the research and the clinical trials?
I would hope so. I would say yes. I mean, maybe that's a little sort of pro-lung. But I think, a couple of years ago, there was a lot of nihilism around lung cancer and what could or could not be achieved. And I think that approach of focusing on these areas, we have seen in real time that the lung cancer portfolio has benefited in terms of the number of patients going on trial, the number of trials available, and the diversity of trials across the spectrum of cancer teams. So I think objectively, although it's hard for me to be objective as the person who was involved in it, I would say so. Okay, thank you very much.
So we'll move now to a very exciting part of the programme, our trainee presentations. And just let the audience know our team leaders session is running in parallel in the room across from the posters. And thank you very much to Olivia McLaughlin, our Head of Startup in Cancer Trials Ireland, for helping to coordinate that programme. So I'll hand over to Guhan and Lynda, and in the essence of time, you may introduce yourselves quickly. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thanks, Angela. Guhan Rangaswamy is my name. I work as a radiation oncologist in St. Luke's. I'm also the National Training Coordinator for the Radiation Oncology Training Scheme. Co-chairing with me today is Dr. Lynda Corrigan, who's a consultant medical oncologist in Tala. I'd like to thank Angela and Claire and the CTI for inviting us to chair this session. So this session is the NCHD oral presentations. It has 20 presentations from trainees in surgery, radiation oncology, medical oncology, and hematology. We have 20 presentations to get through over the next 2 hours. Each presenter has a 5-minute slot, 4 minutes for the actual presentation, and we'll take a couple of questions after each presentation. There's a judging panel which will judge the presentations, and the top 3 presentations will be awarded bursaries at the end of the day. Also like to remind you all that, as Angela said in the intro, there was 87 abstracts submitted, 20 of which are oral, so the remaining 67 abstracts have transformed into posters, which are just outside. So please take some time during the coffee break to go and view the posters as well, please. So without further ado, I'm going to start off by introducing the first speaker. It's Dr. Christina Adesanya from surgery in Beaumont, and her topic is, she's done an audit on colorectal cancer screening and symptoms on immigrant and minority ethnic community. Thank you.
Okay. Hello, it's lovely to meet you all, and I'm really grateful for the opportunity to present here today. I'm Christina Adesanya. I'm a current Beaumont intern in colorectal surgery at the moment, so I'll be presenting today. Okay, so my topic is an audit protocol as part of my master's in surgery. So it involves the engagement with colorectal cancer screening and understanding of colorectal cancer symptoms among an immigrant and minority ethnic patients attending a colorectal clinic. So it's an audit against national standards. So as you know, colorectal cancer is one of the top 5 leading causes of cancer-related mortality in both men and women. It can be diagnosed through screening or through symptomatic presentation, so like hematochezia, abdominal pain, change in bowel habits, weight loss, and appetite loss as well. Advanced presentation can result in maybe emergency surgery, which can be due to needing to resolve an obstruction, perforation, or hemorrhage, and those are associated with higher morbidity, mortality, and stoma formation rates. So the bowel screen is the national bowel screening program launched in 2012, and most recently it involves giving biennial screening to people aged 58 to 70, and they will receive a test kit at home and return it by post. And this will result in them either going for colonoscopy in one of the 16 public hospital endoscopy units across Ireland. So why did I choose to do this audit? So in April 2025, it showed that the screening, the level of screening, unfortunately, fell below the program standard of 50%. This shows that there's quite a variation across populations in who is uptaking screening. And there's limited Irish data at the moment, which shows the barriers and facilitators to screening in different groups. I myself, I'm an immigrant, and I see that screening, unfortunately, it's not always diagnostic, and it's really important for people to know the symptoms of bowel cancer also. Previous research has also shown that colorectal cancer awareness is decreased in the Irish population, and there are knowledge gaps as well. So I thought that it would be interesting to look into this. as the demographic of Ireland is changing. So at the moment, we have a population of 5.15 million people. More than 1 in 10 are non-Irish citizens, and more than 750,000 speak a different language to English at home. So this audit, I thought it would be interesting because immigrants and ethnic minorities, they face quite a few more challenges to people who are natively Irish. For example, coming to Ireland, you may struggle with accessing a GP, you may not have a personal public service number, you might live in direct provision, so you might not have a fixed abode to receive your kit. And you might have poor English. There's also structural barriers such as cultural discomfort with home-based testing and different structural barriers existing with maybe transport to these endoscopy units. So many different trials across the world have looked at different aspects of this, but unfortunately it's quite limited in the Irish space. So just a couple of things, for example, ethnic minority women, they might prefer stronger recommendations to be screened for cancer, and this was shown in other countries. So I'll quickly move on, because there's also a need for people of different, ethnic minorities and immigrants to know about bowel cancer symptoms, and this has been shown to unfortunately be decreased in studies that were taking place across different parts of the world. So my audit will compose of completing questionnaires seen in colorectal cancer clinics in Beaumont Hospital. These are adapted from the Bowel Cancer Awareness Measure, the National Cancer Institute Colorectal Cancer Screening Questionnaire, and the Health Belief Model. So I will audit against these standards. Seen here, the main one will be to kind of see are immigrants being excluded from bowel cancer screening just due to their own personal factors. So I would like to try and fill these gaps, so symptom awareness, equity of screening access, barriers to engagement, and opportunities for improvement. So just to make sure that immigrant and minority ethnic patients, are they aware of the colorectal cancer symptoms? Are bowel cancer screening programs, are they available to all population groups equally? What kind of barriers or systemic or practical barriers exist to limit uptake? And how can we target and improve these going forward? So that's my presentation. Thank you very much for the opportunity. Appreciate it.
Christina. I'll open it up to the floor for any questions for Christina. Christina, how are you going to address the language barriers in carrying out your audit?
I suppose that's one of the things where, unfortunately, people might be excluded just by not even understanding the current recommendations if they're speaking a different language at home to English. So thankfully, I'll be having questionnaires that are translated into some of the top languages seen in the Beaumont community, so including Romanian, Polish, also Russian, French, and Arabic. So I'll have QR codes also that people can scan for ease of access to if they want to fill that out by themselves. But that's a major bias that I want to overcome in doing this study.
Great. Best of luck with it.
Yeah. Thanks very much.
Thank you. Our next presenter is Dr. Kate Coakley from Medical Oncology in Beaumont. She's going to present outcomes from chemoradiotherapy for stage 1 lung cancer patients.
Thanks very much for having me today. So my name is Kate Coakley. I'm currently working as a reg in the Matter, and this is a project I worked on last year with the help of Prof. Naidoo and David O'Reilly. And it's a project that looks at outcomes for chemoradiotherapy and surgical resection in stage 1 small cell lung cancer over the last 28 years, so between 1994 and 2022. So limited stage small cell lung cancer accounts for 30% of the total small cell lung cancer cases, with most of the cases unfortunately presenting at a later stage. So the definition in 2010 was stage 1 to 3, that can be safely treated with definitive radiation doses. However, there's no universally accepted definition. Most cases unfortunately relapse within 2 years, and until recently, no advances have been made in treatment in the last 30 years. So this project focuses on stage 1, which is a subset of limited stage small cell lung cancer. These patients, as per the ESMO guidelines in 2021, if they're deemed to be resectable, they'd proceed to surgical resection. And then afterwards, depending on the nodal status, would proceed to chemoradiotherapy. Just to touch on the advances that have been made in surgery over the last 28 years. So now we'd aim for an R0 resection. We've determined that lobectomy was actually associated with improved survival rate for the cancer surgeries, and they've been able to map out using CT the surgical resection site and using intraoperative dye. They also have robotic techniques that they developed. The practice-changing paper that was released for this field was in 2024. It was a paper published in the New England, which found that 1 year of consolidative durvalumab post-chemoradiotherapy actually led to a significantly longer overall survival. So you can see the curve shows 56 months with the addition of durvalumab versus 33 months with placebo. So it's important to note as well that immunotherapy is not offered to those candidates who were surgically resected. So our study aimed to analyse the overall survival outcomes of patients treated with either chemoradiotherapy or surgical resection in those patients with stage 1 small cell lung cancer in a national cancer registry data group over 28 years. So we looked at patient characteristics using descriptive statistics, and we also created Kaplan-Meier curves with their corresponding 5-year overall survival data. So the total group of all the lung cancer patients included 60,000 patients. Of these, about 8,000 were small cell lung cancer patients. And then the stage 1 subgroup was quite small. It was only about 200 patients. And then there's about 50 patients in each group who proceeded to surgery or chemoradiotherapy. And the balance between male and female was quite equal. The median age range was about 60 to 70. So this graph just shows how dramatically poor the prognosis has been for all stage small cell lung cancer over the last 28 years, with an overall survival at 5 years of only about 6%. And then within this, stage 1, even though these patients are presented at an early stage, they still have a relatively poor overall survival of only 30%. So then we looked at patients who had treatment for their stage 1 small cell lung cancer. So if they were surgically resected, they had the best 5-year overall survival rate of 58% compared to chemoradiotherapy, where they had a 5-year overall survival rate of 40%. So it's important to say that we haven't adjusted for performance status, looking at these. So overall, favourable outcomes if the patients receive treatment, which is unsurprising, with either chemoradiotherapy or surgical resection. And over the last 28 years, we've seen improved outcomes with surgical resection. However, as things are changing, there's no data on optimum therapy of stage 1 small cell lung cancer in the era of chemoimmunotherapy. And it's currently unclear whether patients with stage 1 resectable small cell lung cancer would benefit from chemoradiotherapy followed by immunotherapy rather than surgical resection. So just to touch on future directions, so innovation in small cell lung cancer, they're currently looking in research at transcriptional subtypes to address the fact that plasticity in small cell lung cancer likely drives resistance and response to treatments. And we may be picking out those with the inflamed subtype in future to target with immunotherapy. And as Prof. Naidoo had mentioned, they're looking into neoadjuvant immunotherapy as it's transformed outcomes in non-small cell lung cancer. We'd like to see, could it have similar potential in small cell lung cancer? So that's everything. Thanks.
Well done, Kate. Any questions for Kate? So based on your data right now, Kate, does that influence how you would approach a patient with stage 1 cancer? I know there's a lot of future directions.
I suppose it probably remains to be seen. We don't have the official data yet. I think this, because it was a national cohort, there was some limitations. So I think it definitely needs future studies. But I think there definitely does seem to be potential, to move towards chemoradiotherapy followed by immunotherapy rather than surgical resection. So surgical resection is associated with a lot of morbidity and mortality as well.
Thanks very much, Kate.
Thank you.
Thank you. Our next presenter is Dr. Alba Crowley from the Mater in Medical Oncology, and she's going to be reporting on the first dedicated phase 1 oncology unit.
Thanks very much. So my name's Alva. I'm also working in the Mater as an oncology reg, and my presentation today is a review of the first year of Start Dublin. So this is Ireland's first dedicated phase 1 oncology unit. So I suppose a bit of background and the case for phase 1 trials. As we know, in Ireland we have limited access to EMA-improved oncology therapies versus our European counterparts in other countries. We do have access to novel agents through clinical trials, but I suppose for patients, there are limitations, and they can't access some of these trials. It tends to favor common cancer types, can sometimes exclude heavily pretreated patients, and they often have to undergo randomization. So I suppose historically speaking, phase 1 trials would have been seen as being quite, having a lot of toxicity with maybe not a lot of clinical benefit, but I think modern phase 1 trials are showing improved safety and efficacy. So START is an international network of phase 1 units. It was established in 2007 in Texas and in 2024 at the Mater Hospital. So it's providing Irish patients with access to novel cancer drugs without that need for international travel. So the aims were to review START Dublin's inaugural year with a focus on demographics, participation, and clinical benefit. And we reviewed the records of all patients enrolled onto a clinical trial at START Dublin between December 24 and 25. The data was collected from ARIA, which was the electronic health record, Encore, and SharePoint. And the data we gathered included baseline demographics, their previous lines of treatment, how many lines of treatment they'd had, clinical outcomes, any adverse events, treatment discontinuations, and resource utilization. So in terms of the results, patient characteristics-wise, so there was 140 patients enrolled across 10 studies. 77 people underwent tissue pre-screening. 63 were then assigned to a therapeutic study. And I suppose the aim for, I think, year 1 in START was to treat 50 patients, and 50 patients achieved cycle 1, day 1. The mean age is 61 years. There was 82% of patients treated were female. They all had stage 4 disease and had an average of 3 prior lines of treatment before being enrolled on a trial in START. I suppose reflective of that female predominance, the main cancers that were treated were ovarian, breast, and endometrial cancer. So in terms of patient experience, the mean time on trial was 144 days or 4.7 months, but there was a range between 1.2 to 9.4 months. This is from cycle 1, day 1 to the end of treatment visit, so some people are obviously still actively on trial. The average attendances in the year was 24, but that ranged from 5 to 65 in the year. And then the average distance that people had to travel to START Dublin was 52 kilometres. So this is as the crow flies. But you can see some people live down the road 1.8 kilometres, whereas some patients are travelling over 200 kilometres. So then in terms of just briefly clinical outcomes and safety, there were 41 of the 50 patients that were treated evaluable per RECIST criteria. So 2 out of 41 had a complete response on trial as their best response, or 4.9%, 39% partial response, 41.5% stable disease as best response, and 6%, or 3 out of the 50 treated patients, had to discontinue due to toxicity. So this waterfall plot just demonstrates those best response rates for the patients enrolled or treated on trials at START. So I suppose the key takeaways are there's growing capacity for phase 1 trials in Ireland, and we can have safe delivery of these drugs in heavily pretreated patients, and I think there's some evidence of meaningful clinical benefit, as well as, I suppose, Irish patients not having to travel to access these drugs. There are my references, and thanks so much.
Well done, Alva. Thanks, that's really, really nice data to see. Does anybody have any questions?
Thanks. It's really interesting and fantastic figures. I was wondering if it will create a pipeline of potential phase 2, phase 3 trials for the wider network.
Yeah, I don't know. I know that the plan for next year, there's like 10 trials ongoing at the moment, but to hopefully expand to up to 25 trials with 100 patients treated next year. But I actually do not know.
Okay, thanks.
Okay, great. Thanks, Alva. Thanks very much.
Thank you. Our next presenter is Dr. Richard Daly from Radiation Oncology in Beaumont. He's going to present a case report of a synchronous metastatic rectal and prostate cancer. Richard.
Hello, good morning. My name is Richard Daly, and I'm presenting a case of synchronous de novo metastatic rectal and prostate cancer in conjunction with Professor Brian O'Neill in Beaumont. Our patient, Mr. M, he's 62 years of age. He presented with perineal necrotizing fasciitis. He has no past medical history. Apologies if anyone is squeamish. His perineal necrotizing fasciitis was managed with multiple debridements and achieved good wound healing with vacuum-assisted closure dressings. A scope subsequently revealed a moderately differentiated invasive rectal adenocarcinoma, microsatellite stable, and from there we pursued MRI rectum, revealing locally invasive low rectal tumor with sphincter involvement. Prostatic involvement noted, MRI prostate pelvis confirmed, P5 lesion with restricted diffusion into transition zone. There was concerning bone metastases and a suspicious inguinal node. From there, right ischial tuberosity, biopsy confirmed metastatic adenocarcinoma, and bone metastases were seen in osseous uptake bone scan. In regards to treatment, hormone therapy is well understood in regards its role from Hodges and Huggins' seminal paper, and ADT is the standard of care in metastatic castrate-sensitive disease. He was given a Degarelix and plans for an ARPI post-chemoradiotherapy, and capecitabine with radiation concurrent for the rectal cancer. The radiation plan was 3-phase, targeting the rectum, the prostate, and the inguinal nodes. Here we can see an axial slice with the GTV, PTV, and CTV delineated. Prostate trials, we're going to focus on a couple, particularly where the HARAD and STAMPEDE found no overall survival benefit in this patient cohort or metastatic castrate-sensitive patients, and a meta-analysis subsequently found there was a benefit in this forest plot we can see with patients with low volume disease. This was incorporated into NCCN guidelines whereby high volume metastatic disease should be not receiving radiation. However, the PEACE-1 trial published late 2024 raised questions, and we can see here in Kaplan-Meier curves, the top dark blue line represents the patients received benefit radiation for radiographic progression-free survival, reduced genitourinary events, and castration resistance-free survival, proposing that prostate radiotherapy could become a component in both high and low volume disease. Now, why did the results differ? We can see as the standard of care changes between trials in regards to docetaxel and an ARPI, this raises questions and proposes that as the standard of care evolves, so will the treatment we deliver to our patients. Now, our patient had both rectal and prostate cancers. He would have been excluded from those trials we've discussed. However, the largest study looking at this with a curative intent was an Irish group, Lavin et al., and it found challenges, particularly with dose escalation for these anatomically proximate cancers. A solution could be interstitial brachytherapy, but there is toxicity challenges with permanent colostomy, fistulas, anastomotic leaks, and stenosis. So back to our patient. We were concerned regarding pleural effusions and we repeated a CT thorax. Unfortunately, widespread nodules were noted and biopsy confirmed metastatic rectal adenocarcinoma. So he was not for further radiation after phase 1, and follow-up included medical, radiation, and palliative care. So in conclusion, Fournier's gangrene led by rectal cancer is rare but very aggressive. Prostate radiotherapy is a component of metastatic castrate-sensitive disease treatment, and synchronous cancer rates are increasing, but there are treatment challenges. William Rottingen, on his discovery of radiation, noted, "I did not think I investigated, and there are many outstanding questions left in the 2 most common cancers in men. And with the aid of Cancer Trials Ireland and IROG, we will continue to question." Thank you.
Thanks, Richard. Any questions for Richard?
I have one. Richard, you said in the background of the fasciitis with which he presented, was there any concern about giving him pelvic radiotherapy on that background?
I think they're definitely he was discussed at multiple multidisciplinary meetings with close involvement of colorectal surgeons, and wound healing was an essential part of that. So vacuum-assisted closure dressings achieved that, and we had to delay treatment commencing until that was achieved.
Okay, great. All right. Any other questions? Great. Thank you, Richard. Our next speaker is Dr. Oana Diak from Medical Oncology in James's, who's going to present on a population-based analysis of young onset gastroesophageal adenocarcinoma.
Thank you. Good morning, everyone. So my name is Oana. I'm one of the oncology SPRs, and I'm also currently doing a PhD. And I really want to start by thanking the organizing committee for giving me the opportunity to present the study to you today. So I'm really interested in young onset gastroesophageal cancer. So this is upper GI cancer. These are patients that are less than 50 years of diagnosis at the time of diagnosis. And we have multiple reports worldwide that are actually showing a fast rise in incidence. So when I started the PhD, one of the first questions I really wanted to ask, well, what is happening closer to home? So this is how this all-Ireland population-based analysis came about. So I got data from the National Cancer Registry in Ireland and Northern Ireland. I have patients from 1999 to 2022, and I have just over 32,000 patients with upper GI cancer. And one of the main reasons or the points to actually undertake this exercise is to really add to what is a very limited body of data looking at these young onset patients in Ireland and Europe, but also inform future care planning or screening, potential screening programs. So out of the 32,000 patients, 21,700 were adenocarcinoma. So these are the cohort I'm going to present the results of today. 1/3 of these were esophageal and 2/3 were gastric. So one of the first things I've done was to actually split the cohort into 3 different age groups. The young onset, which were less than 50 years of age at diagnosis, average onset that were between 50 and 70, and late onset, which are over 70 years of age at diagnosis. So with regards to spread, there were 2-to-1 male to female with regards to gender. One of the really interesting things I saw early on was that when I split the entire cohort by cancer site, so starting from the top of the esophagus all the way to the distal stomach, you can see, yes, excellent, we have a pointer. So you can see that actually, males are blue and females are orange, and these are all young onset. So males predominate in the lower esophagus, whereas the ratio actually flips quite significantly. In the more distal part of the stomach, we are seeing a lot more females. So this could also possibly be an early signal that we're seeing more young females with stomach cancer. In addition, these young onset cancers present with more aggressive disease biology. They tend to be more poorly differentiated and more commonly with diffuse histology, especially in the gastric subtypes. Not only that, but they also present with more advanced disease at presentation. So in the overall cohort, 54% of these young onset patients were stage 4 when they stepped into the hospital to get their first scope. And this percentage ranges across the different 5 cancer subtypes that I mentioned, cancer sites, sorry. And one of the most impressive, not in a good way, were the gastric NOS, where nearly 70% of these young patients presented with stage 4 diagnosis. The next thing I looked at was socioeconomic status, where we're seeing a stepwise increase with deprivation. And this, I'm seeing the same relationship. This is the overall cohort that I'm showing you here, but I see the exact same relationship with age groups, but also by the 5 different cancer sites. Then with regards to incidence, so this is lower esophageal, and I'm showing you here average annual percentage changes. You can see the 3 subgroups, total males and females. When we look at the young onset, they're actually increasing at an average of 2% per year, and this is very much male-driven. But similarly, the average and late onset subgroups, they're also increasing. Comparing this to the gastric subtypes, which is also very interesting, actually the young onsets are all, I know you might not see from there, but all of these p-values are not significant. So these are actually stable. But there is a very clear, sustained decrease in the average onset and late onset cohorts that have been going on over the last 20 years. So even though the young onsets in gastrics are not changing, their proportion is actually increasing in the gastric cancer population. And then I also looked at survival, and even after multivariate Cox adjustment, there is actually a survival benefit that we are noticing in the young onset group. So lastly, this is the conclusion or the summary side. We've spoken about incidence, socioeconomic status, more aggressive tumor biology with a small survival benefit. So with that, I really want to thank my PIs, our research team, and I want to thank you for your attention.
Well done, Oana. Any questions in the audience for Oana?
I think we have a question at the front.
Hi, lovely presentation. I was just wondering, is there any link with obesity, or is that data captured? Is there any way to pull out that information at all? Or do you believe that there is going to be a link?
Unfortunately not. So not from the information that I get from the cancer registries. They just don't capture that sort of detail, though it would have been very, very nice. There is one particular study that I can think of that there is some links with obesity between young onset, but to be honest, the patients that we see in clinic, or the patients that I would have been seeing in clinic over the last 4 or 5 years now at this stage, they don't tend to be obese, they don't tend to be heavy smokers, not an awful lot of family history. So my feeling is, being in this field for several years now, is that there's something else going on, apart from the usual or the more common risk factors that we can think of or that we associate with these cancers.
You don't know what that is yet?
We don't know, but we're working hard on it.
Thanks very much, Joanna. We might move on.
Thank you very much.
Thanks.
Our next presenter is Dr. Rachel Dillon from Medical Oncology in James's, and she's going to be presenting on the prevalence and spectrum of BRCA pathogenic variants in breast cancer. Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. So I'm Rachel. I'm one of the SPRs currently in Waterford, and today I'm presenting on a project I did last year in James's on the prevalence and spectrum of germline BRCA1 and 2 pathogenic variants in a cohort of breast cancer patients in Ireland. So BRCA status has become central to treatment decisions in patients with ER-positive, HER2-negative, metastatic or locally advanced breast cancer. So in this cohort of patients, having a BRCA1 or 2 pathogenic variant confers eligibility for a PARP inhibitor, which we know have proven survival benefits. And access to PARP inhibitors has led to the development of a national referral pathway for germline testing in Ireland. So while we know international prevalence rates are around 5 to 10%, robust Irish data has been limited until now. So I'm just going to do a brief overview of kind of the evolution and the timeline for PARP inhibitors. So in 2014, olaparib was approved initially in the ovarian cancer cohort. This led then in 2017, the NCCP started to outroll a direct ordering pathway to allow oncologists to order germline testing on their patients. In 2017 as well, the Olympiad trial was published, and this looked at olaparib in HER2-negative metastatic BRCA-mutated breast cancer patients, followed by the Embraca trial in 2018, and this similarly looked at the same cohort but looked at talazoparib, which following this trial has been HSE reimbursed since 2021. And then more recently, the Olympia trial looked at adjuvant olaparib for early breast cancer patients who are BRCA mutated, and this has been reimbursed by the HSE for this indication since 2025. So then the primary objective of this project was to determine the prevalence of BRCA1 and 2 pathogenic variants in a cohort of ER-positive, HER2-negative, locally advanced or metastatic patients. So all patients were referred either to James's or Beaumont Hospital in order to be included, so they had to have ER-positive, HER2-negative disease, and they were referred based on their eligibility for a PARP inhibitor through the national referral pathway. And just important to note is that these patients did not have prior genetic testing based on either personal or family risk. Testing was done by single molecule MIP sequencing and MLPA for large genomic rearrangements. So then if we look at the cohort, so the total cohort tested was 756 patients, and they came from 37 referral centres nationwide. The mean age at testing was 59 years, and in the cohort there was 36 germline BRCA1 and 2 pathogenic variants identified, leading to an overall prevalence of 4.8% in this cohort. So then if we look at the mutation distribution amongst BRCA1 and BRCA2, so of all the pathogenic variants identified, 61% of these were BRCA2, and that is what we would expect in a cohort of ER-positive patients. And there was 14 variants of uncertain significance found in the cohort. So the study showed that there was a very high diversity of variants found, so there was only one recurrent variant found, and that was found in 3 patients. And it is a variant that is kind of well studied and known in European populations. and then all the identified pathogenic variants, so kind of 36 variants, would confer patient eligibility for a PARP inhibitor. If we look at the geographic distribution, so of all the pathogenic variants found, 14 of them were referred from University Hospital in Galway, followed by 7 cases in the Mater, 5 cases from St. Vincent's Hospital, and then 3 cases from University Hospital in Limerick. So when we looked at the age analysis of the patients, so as expected, BRCA-positive patients were younger than the general cohort, so the mean age at testing for the overall cohort was 58.7 years, while in those patients who were BRCA-positive, they were on average 7.3 years younger than the overall population. And again, this is what we would expect in kind of with the biology of hereditary breast cancer, and kind of highlights the importance of earlier testing in higher risk populations. So this study is the first kind of national benchmark for BRCA prevalence in this specific cohort. So our overall observed prevalence was 4.8%, and this is slightly lower than the international estimates of 5 to 10%. And this is likely due to selection bias. So as I mentioned before, patients with a known pathogenic variant based on their personal or family history were not captured in this study. So as the largest study to date in this cohort, this data kind of provides a critical foundation to provide evidence-based service delivery in Ireland. So I'd just like to thank ISMO and Cancer Trials Ireland for the opportunity to present, as well as the patients and their families, and a particular thanks to the co-authors and Prof Naidoo and Dr. Coleman for their support.
Any questions for Rachel? Miriam?
Thanks very much, Rachel. It's very interesting data. Can I ask, do you know, have there been, of those who were detected, did they all access the PARP inhibitors? Do you have that outcome data?
Yeah, we'd love to have that, and that would be great to see how many people did end up getting a PARP inhibitor, but we tried to get that, but you'd need ethics from all 37 referral centres, so we just have what was on that kind of CMD diagnostic form, which doesn't include information afterwards on whether the patients received the therapy. But it would be good to know that.
Great, thank you so much, Rachel.
Thank you. Okay, moving on. Our next speaker is Dr. Kevin Dunn from Limerick Medical Oncology, who's done a survey on bereavement care practices and consultants working in cancer services. Thanks, Kevin.
Morning, everyone. Thanks for inviting me to speak today on our national survey study of bereavement care practices of consultants working in cancer services in Ireland. So bereavement care is recognised as an essential component of practice in cancer services, yet evidence from international studies shows wide variability in how it's delivered. Surveys from Israel, the US and the UK have demonstrated inconsistent engagement with clinicians, as well as limited training in bereavement care in these countries. In Ireland, the Voices Majam study demonstrated that many bereaved relatives value hospital-initiated supports, such as condolence letters or conversations, yet a substantial proportion of people who wanted supports, up to 30%, did not receive these, highlighting the need to further understand bereavement care practices in Ireland. These issues prompted our study. The primary aim was to examine current bereavement care practices among consultant clinicians in cancer services in Ireland. Secondary aims included to evaluate training exposure and preparedness, perceived barriers and facilitators, equity considerations and interest in further training. We conducted a national cross-sectional anonymous online survey of consultants working in Irish cancer services. All complete responses were included in the analysis, and statistical analysis was performed using JASP software. A total of 54 consultants completed the survey in full. We had national representation across all HSC regions, a broad range of consultant experience and participation from all included specialties. Our survey found that half of consultants rarely or never send condolence letters, indicating that this is not a routine practice. Time and workload were the dominant barriers, with additional concerns around professional boundaries and uncertainty about appropriateness. Other bereavement care practices were predominantly reactive. Clinicians more commonly responded to contact initiated by families, such as taking telephone calls, whilst proactive practices such as arranging meetings or referring patients to bereavement support programs were undertaken less frequently. Almost half of consultants reported no formal training in bereavement communication. Interest in further training was mixed, with 34% expressing definite interest, 38% possible interest, and 28% no interest, and there was a significant association between specialty and training interest, with radiation oncologists more likely to express interest and palliative medicine consultants more likely to report no interest. While most consultants felt prepared to communicate with bereaved families, confidence in recognising families requiring who need additional bereavement support was less consistent, with only 35% of consultants reporting high levels of confidence in identifying these families. Consultant engagement in bereavement care was most strongly motivated by sudden or distressing deaths, perceived family vulnerability, younger patient age, and established relationships with patients and families. We found that the most common barriers to consultant engagement in bereavement care were lack of time and workload pressures, alongside concerns around intruding on families' privacy or grief. Consultants largely perceive bereavement contact as benefiting patients' families and the service, and as an important component of good oncology and palliative care practice. In terms of bereavement support for families from minority cultural or religious groups, there was a significant difference between specialties, with palliative medicine consultants significantly more likely to rate services as meeting bereavement needs well or very well. In conclusion, current practice in Ireland is variable and predominantly reactive. Nearly half of consultants report no formal bereavement care training, with limited confidence in identifying families needing additional support. Most clinicians express definite or potential interest in further bereavement care education, with significant specialty-specific differences. Perceptions of how well bereavement services meet the needs of minority cultural and religious groups varied significantly by specialty. Thank you for listening, and thanks to Dr. Niamh Peters, Principal Investigator, Dr. Umar Leem and Clara Farris, co-investigators, and all the consultants who kindly responded to our survey. Here are my references, and here is a QR code to the survey, and we're still taking responses. Thank you.
Many thanks, Kevin. That was really interesting. Any questions for Kevin?
Thank you very much, and that was really interesting. Interesting that the palliative consultants didn't feel the need, for further. Presumably that's because they're so skilled already in that area and there's so much interaction with patients and their families. Do you think that's the case, or were you able to drill down into that a little bit?
I suppose our study wasn't designed to look exactly at the reasons why. However, I'd hypothesize that it's probably because I think they get formal kind of bereavement communication training during their higher specialist training. So,
I'm just wondering, is there any role across palliative services to potentially facilitate some interaction with other disciplines and the families?
I think that probably happens already at times, but probably not enough in acute services. Yeah.
I think Jerry had a quick question.
Patients often feel very left behind when, our relatives feel left behind when a patient dies and the service hasn't contacted them. Do you think it should be a standard of care that we send a bereavement letter or some final contact from the service?
I think if you were to standardize things and make it not enforce, but make it something that you have to do, it might take away from it a bit. And as we can see, there are consistent kind of barriers across the survey to being able to provide some of the care, which are time and workload pressures, and this would add to it. But educating people in how to do these things and refer people to bereavement counsellors and things could be helpful. I don't think we should make a policy, though, that every oncologist, radiation oncologist, hematologist, palliative care consultant needs to send a letter every time a patient dies.
Well done, Kevin. Thank you.
Thank you.
Next presenter is Dr. Dominika Gregorzek from Hematology in the Marta, and her topic is acute myeloid leukemia in the over 80s.
Good morning, my name is Dominika and I work as a hematology registrar in Mater University Hospital. And I'm going to talk about acute myeloid leukemia in patients over 8 years old. So acute myeloid leukemia in patients over 8 years old is no longer rare. It's becoming clinical practice, it's becoming routine practice. Yet, when we look at the evidence-based, when we look at the evidence guiding our decisions in this age group, this age group is largely invisible. Treatments are extrapolated from younger and fitter patients, and frailty and comorbidity complicate the care. So we asked simple but very uncomfortable question. Are we offering enough to our elderly AML patients, or are we offering the wrong things? So AML incidence increases with age. And this age group represents growing population of new diagnoses. However, they consistently are underrepresented in clinical trials, and that means that the decisions regarding the treatment are extrapolated from younger and fitter patients rather than from the clinical evidence. Intensive chemotherapy is rarely appropriate, and hypomethylating agents offer very limited survival benefit. Multimorbidity and comorbidities and frailty complicate care further. This creates a significant evidence gap. This creates significant evidence gap, particularly relevant for clinical trial design. So we conducted a retrospective review of all patients aged over 80 or older diagnosed in AML in our center between 2015 and 2025. We looked at the demographics, comorbidities, performance status, disease biology, treatment, and overall survival. Median age was over 84 years old. So just to illustrate how poor the disease is in over 80 years old patients, all patients had ECOG status of 2 or higher, lots of comorbidities and polypharmacy, and many of them had previously been treated for hematological or solid organ malignancies. 70% of them had ELN of 20, had adverse risk according to ELN 2022 criteria. And over a quarter of patients had a complex karyotype, and almost 1/5 had biallelic TP53 mutations. Nearly 80% had bone marrow performed, and majority of those who didn't were not fit enough to have bone marrow biopsy performed. Now, in terms of treatment, almost half of them received best supportive care alone, and 54% were treated with azacitidine-based chemotherapy. Outcomes were poor. Median overall survival was 2.1 months, and 25% of them died within 1 month. Importantly, a small subgroup treated with azacitidine-based chemotherapy achieved meaningful benefits. So 13% of them survived over 12 months, and the longest survival patient was 3 years. So in summary, AML in patients over 8 years old carries an extremely poor prognosis in real-world guidelines, in real-world practice. Frailty, comorbidity burden, and adverse disease biology limit therapeutic options, and current strategies offer very limited survival benefit. So these findings highlight 2 key priorities. First, the need for standardized supportive care-focused pathways that prioritize quality of life. And the second, particularly relevant for this audience, need for the clinical trials designed specifically for the oldest AML patients, adapted with frailty-adapted eligibility, low-intensity or oral chemotherapies, and outcomes beyond the survival. I would like to thank my colleagues who helped.
Well done, Dominica. Any questions in the audience? I might ask, in the patients that you, the older patients who did receive treatment with azacitidine, did you look at toxicity or dose adjustments in that group? How well tolerated was it?
So we didn't specifically look at the toxicities, but there were quite a few patients in whom we kind of had to stop the chemotherapy because the toxicities were quite high. I don't have a data point over there, but one of them actually didn't tolerate therapy. And the most common toxicities were GI, kind of stomach upset, diarrhea, nausea was the highest kind of toxicity or highest side effect in those patients.
Okay, great. Thank you very much.
Next presenter is Dr. Alana Kelly from CUH Medical Oncology, and her topic is Greening and Oncology Day 1.
Hello, and thank you all for inviting me to present my project today on integrating sustainability into a chemotherapy day ward. I'm actually one of the final year medical students in UCC. So this time last year, over 750,000 homes in Ireland were without electricity due to Storm Éowyn. We are caring for patients in an era of more frequent and more intense extreme weather events, and this is as a result of carbon emission-induced climate change. Healthcare is not an innocent bystander in this. It is carbon saturated, with emissions equivalent to that of the continent of Africa. Improved patient outcomes over the last number of decades have come at a cost of an erosion in planetary health. So this is a concept known as climate toxicity. It's where the action of healthcare delivery inadvertently contributes to the conditions that worsen human health. So what if we did nothing? Well, healthcare is growing, and over the next 2 decades, our impact and our emissions are expected to triple if current trends continue. So to address this, an infographic was developed highlighting various sustainability touch points that we can integrate throughout oncology care. These include things like vial sharing, the use of subcutaneous formulations, and the use of oral pre-medications in preference to intravenous. So just to highlight the impact of this, oral paracetamol, 1 gram of it generates just 1/68th of the carbon footprint of 1 gram of intravenous paracetamol packaged in a glass. So with the help of HSE Spark funding, we have developed we've begun the first steps in integrating these changes into COH. Our overall aim is to develop a green prescribing checklist to aid clinicians to make more sustainable choices. So the study had 3 main parts. First is a prescription audit, which took place over 3 weeks, looking at the various sustainability touchpoints in prescribing and measuring plastic waste generated as a result. Second is a patient survey, looking at patient acceptability of these sustainable practices. And third was a healthcare professional survey, assessing attitudes, behaviours, and barriers to sustainable practice. So we found in the prescription audit, there was inconsistent use of oral supportive medications, with 23% still given intravenously. And there was varying integration of other sustainability touchpoints. There was 46 grams of plastic waste generated per patient attendance. In our patient survey, we had 208 respondents, and over 91% said that sustainability should be a priority in healthcare. 82% had a preference for oral medication over intravenous, and 60% were accepting of some telehealth appointments. So our healthcare professional survey, we had 72 respondents, and over 80% agreed both that climate change has a negative impact on human health and also that sustainable practices have the ability to mitigate this, yet only 15% routinely consider environmental impact when prescribing. The main barriers were lack of time, lack of training, and a lack of institutional support. So this study broadly shows that patients are willing, staff are motivated, and opportunities for sustainable practice already exist, yet often they're not availed of. So what next? Our plan is to develop this green prescribing checklist, which can provide vital guidance, information, and support to prescribers when making more sustainable choices. And our plan is to re-audit after its implementation to assess its impact. Just to finish off with a quote, the time for action is now, because the greatest threat to our planet is the belief that somebody else will save it. Thank you, and I'll take any questions.
Thanks, Alana. That's impressive. You're a final year medical student, you said. Well done. Any questions for Alana?
So, Alana, you mentioned the lowest uptake was in the healthcare professionals, right?
Yes.
In terms of answering the survey, as well as a lack of training was one of the responses. So how do you educate them?
Sorry?
How would you educate them in terms of?
Well, the idea is that the green prescribing checklist will be a valuable educational tool for them. It's not going to be just a tick box kind of exercise. It'll be there as something to give information, guidance, and support, and hopefully integrate sustainability into the workflow as opposed to it just being something extra to think about.
And is this something you're taking forward with the re-audit?
Yeah. The plan with the HSE Spark funding is that they will fund somebody to come in and re-audit after its implementation.
Okay, great.
Thank you very much.
Our next speaker is Dr. Mairead Lyons from CUH in Medical Oncology, and it's a review of impact of dying and death on doctors in training.
Hello, my name is Mairead Lyons, and thank you for the opportunity to present here today on behalf of Cork University Hospital. And our survey today is Great Expectations at End of Life, and it is a national survey assessing the impact of death and dying on our doctors in training. And just before I begin, I just want you to pause and absorb this quotation by Charles Dickens. It says, "I looked at the stars and considered how awful it would be for a man to turn his face up to them as he froze to death and see no help or pity in all the glittering multitude." When I first read this, it reminded me of all our dying patients, who also eagerly search our faces for answers or truths, and whom we as healthcare professionals so often fail. But our presentation and survey today gives us a small insight into that why. So in 2024, Cork University Hospital, led by Dr. Conor Maloney, completed a survey assessing the impact of dying and death on our doctors in training. The results, as you can see, are compelling. And it made us wonder, were our doctors in training at CUH isolated in their opinions, or was this issue more extensive within Ireland? So, we know in Ireland there are over 20,000 practicing physicians, 1,330 new medical graduates, 85 hospitals, 15,372 inpatient beds, and over 35,000 deaths occurring in Ireland per annum, with over 41.7% of these occurring in our acute hospitals. That's a lot of doctors and a lot of death. So with all this death and dying, and with all the exposure our doctors in training have to dying and death, we wanted to determine their competence and confidence levels of the doctors in training nationally, to review and understand their support and educational needs around end-of-life care, and also to ascertain the emotional and spiritual effect dying and death is having on our doctors in training nationally. So, we invited 6 HSE health regions to participate through a 27-item electronic survey, and this was distributed across sites with the help of our end-of-life care coordinators and local medical teams. Ethical approval was granted by SHREC and by participating hospitals. Our survey questions including asking our doctors in training about their perceived quality of education and training received in caring for dying patients and their families, competence and confidence levels in caring for patients at end of life, the availability of emotional and professional support systems during their training, and the personal, spiritual, and existential well-being in response to death. To date, we had 170 doctors in training respond from 4 HSE health regions, with 3 levels of doctors responding. And our key findings are: only 32% agreed, or strongly agreed, that their training adequately prepared them for end-of-life care. Only 55% reported feeling competent in caring for dying patients at end of life, and only 54% felt confident in discussing end-of-life care issues with their patients. 74% reported that a patient's death affected them personally and prompted reflection on their own mortality. Yet, only 15% felt that adequate professional support or formal debriefing was available after a patient's death. 51% reported feeling unsettled about their future. Does that sound familiar? And encouragingly, 89% believed that their life has real purpose. To conclude, end-of-life care is a significant component of care for our doctors in training, yet many of our trainees are reporting insufficient preparation and limited emotional support around this foundational element of care. Findings of this survey highlight a clear need for structured, mandatory undergraduate and postgraduate education in end-of-life care, alongside improved institutional hospital support. Death is not a medical failure, but poor quality end-of-life care is. Thank you.
Thanks, Mairead. Well done.
Thank you.
Any questions from Mairead? Mairead, when it comes to, you've referenced what you think will be helpful for our trainees. When it comes to institutional-led practice, what components of that do you think we need to change to support our trainees?
I suppose there's many levels of it. I suppose recently the Irish Hospice Foundation have introduced practical languages and phrases which now replaces our Breaking Bad News programme, and I would love to see this rolled out within our institutions. And I won't say become mandatory, but definitely an encouragement for people to attend so that we can learn through compassionate conversations and education how to support our doctors in training.
Just thinking of a catastrophic death or a very impactful death of a patient on a ward, what place do you think that hot debriefs or SWOT rounds might play in terms of helping trainees cope in this way?
I actually think they're imperative. And I think debriefing should become part of our morbidity and mortality talks. So, they should be mandatory within hospitals, that after every death, that it should be looked at with regards to the impact, whether this was a good death, could we have done something better, and how could we have supported the people that were involved in that death? Because it's only by talking about death and dying that we can actually improve the process and the care that we're giving to our patients and our families, and also to ourselves. Because I think sometimes it's the professionals or the forgotten people within our hospital system, and we have to mind them emotionally and spiritually.
Thanks, Mairead.
Okay, thank you very much.
Okay, we're halfway there. Ciara McNevin is next, medical oncology in St. James's, and she's going to be talking about the prevalence of BRCA variants in the ovarian cancer cohort.
Good morning, everybody. My name is Ciara McNevin. I'm one of the oncology SPRs in the Mater Hospital, and I'm delighted to be here presenting my research on the prevalence of BRCA1 and 2 variants in an ovarian cancer cohort, outcomes from a nationwide testing program. So we know, these are a bit messed up. So we know that ovarian cancer is one of the most lethal gynecological cancers. There is no screening, and most patients present with advanced disease. We know that having a BRCA1 or 2 variant greatly increases our lifetime risk of ovarian cancer, and that PARP inhibitors offer the greatest benefit in this cohort. So this is a bit of a sister project to what Rachel Dillon presented earlier on. This is the advent of PARP inhibitors over the past decade or so, and the benefit of which is really depicted here. The SOLO-1 trial, 7-year data, hazard ratio for death of 0.55 with adjuvant olaparib after chemotherapy in patients with a BRCA1 or a BRCA2 mutation. To respond to this, Roshni Callahan introduced the TBRCA pilot study to get direct order genetic testing straight from our clinics, and then this was launched by the NCCP in 2020. So we know that the prevalence of BRCA1 or 2 variants varies widely across populations, which is largely due to ancestry founder effects. However, there's limited published data in the Irish populations, and there's over-reliance on international data. This is a fairly stark diagram, and this is where Ireland fits in Europe in terms of our access to e-health records. And I just wanted to highlight how difficult a data landscape we have here in Ireland. Not only do we have a 2-tier system, health system, public and private, we also have a lot of data fragmentation, which makes answering a simple question such as how many women in Ireland with ovarian cancer have a BRCA mutation difficult. So the aim of this study was to report real-world outcomes from a 3-year national BRCA1 and 2 testing programme and characterise the germline and somatic BRCA variants in Ireland. So what were our results? 535 patients were referred for testing, the majority of which went to St. James's Hospital. The median age was women in their 6th decade, as we would expect in this disease, and the majority were high-grade serous ovarian cancer. 455 patients underwent germline testing, and 360 patients underwent tumour testing. 292 of these had both germline and tumour testing, so they underwent paired testing, which is important. So 31 referral centres, 2 testing centres. Our prevalence rate for germline BRCA, 10.3% in women with ovarian cancer. This was distributed fairly even between BRCA1 and BRCA2. And then for our somatic rate, 9.5%, which was largely driven by BRCA1 at 6.1%. It's really critical to understand the data, so it's important to know that our germline prevalence is calculated on them 455 patients who had germline testing, while our somatic rate relies on paired testing, because we need to understand that that BRCA in the tumour isn't being driven by a germline variant. So that was calculated for patients with paired testing with a negative germline. And this is kind of more of the same. This is how our cohort diagram broke down for germline, somatic, and tumour-only testing. So as we would expect, patients with a germline BRCA mutation were younger, and we had 22 patients who had a recurrent clinically actionable variant across Ireland. I don't really have time to go into the data about all of this, but we did have a number of variants which we saw were recurrent in various clusters on the south and in the east of Ireland. So how does this align with our international evidence? Well, there is a lower germline BRCA prevalence than international meta-analysis estimates. However, our findings did align with UK real-world data. The US showed that the prevalence of BRCA varies widely by ancestry. So the non-Ashkenazi European rate is about 10%, which matches what we've reported here. The key limitations, because of our fragmented health systems in Ireland, there's limited data completeness and there's a lack of comprehensive clinical data, which Rachel has addressed. Previously known patients with a BRCA mutation weren't included, so this is likely an underestimation of our true prevalence. So we also did a modelling of cost analysis. We are outliers in Europe in that we do paired testing up front. Most patients do reflex germline first, then somatic, or vice versa. We presented this data at ESMO. So what is our conclusion? It's that nationwide mainstream germline and somatic BRCA1 testing is feasible in Ireland. The rates are consistent with UK real-world data and international estimates. And I would just like to thank the organisers for this opportunity to present, and to all the patients and their family. Thank you very much.
Any questions for Ciara? I think there's a question over here.
Just a quick question. I was wondering, do we have a national policy where a patient, when they are diagnosed with BRCA positive ovarian or breast cancer, that their family members are tested? I recently met a patient who was diagnosed with BRCA positive cancer 2 years ago, but they somehow didn't inform their siblings, or their children weren't tested for it. So is it a patient's discretion, or how does it work?
Yeah, it's a complex question. I think that there's been some very complex case studies and legal cases which have happened in the UK, which we take precedence by. I think there is a right not to inform, but it is our duty as clinicians to inform the patient of their risk, and to inform the patient of their risk to their siblings. All patients with a germline BRCA mutation should be referred to the clinical genetics service, and the genetics counsellor can tease that out with them. I'm not a barrister, so I don't exactly know legally where we stand, but I'm pretty sure that our role is to ensure that they understand the risk for their family members.
Great, thank you so much. Thanks.
Next presenter is Dr. Mariam Nadeem from Radiation Oncology in St. Luke's, who's done an audit on radioactive iodine therapy in differentiated thyroid cancer.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Mariam. I'm Redon Reg from St. Luke's Radiation Oncology Network. And today I'm going to present an audit that was done at St. Luke's Hospital, that is a part of SLRON. And it was about patients who were newly diagnosed with differentiated thyroid cancer. And they had adjuvant treatment with radioactive iodine. And we wanted to know whether how adhere are we with the British Thyroid Association guidelines. A bit of background before we proceed. So DTC has very good outcomes generally, about 97% 5-year disease-specific survival rate for papillary thyroid cancer, and the incidence is rising every year. Approximately 160 to 250 patients are diagnosed, and the incidence has increased 300% over the period of 15 years. So the rise is mainly due to the increased detection of early diseases like T1 papillary cancers, and the most common patients are females. So the management approach is RAI used selectively as per the BTA 2014 guidelines to recommend risk-adapted use of this treatment, dynamic risk stratification, and post-therapy scans. This is the graphical presentation of the data that I've presented here. So what is radioactive iodine treatment? So it means to ablate the remnant thyroid tissue with using the radioactive isotope of iodine-131 that causes the destruction of the residual thyroid tissue, whether it's the normal or the malignant one. And radioiodine therapy refers to the administration 131 with the intention to treat recurrent, persistent, or metastatic disease. So the aim of the audit, the main aim of the audit was to assess how is our clinical practice in patients who have this diagnosis and get the treatment on these parameters. Indication, is the treatment really indicated? Timing, what is the time interval from the diagnosis till the delivery of this treatment? And RAI activity, the dose we provide as per the risk stratification of patients. TSH preparation before RAI, and uptake scans as a part of follow-up. It was a retrospective audit, and the patients were selected from January 2024 till December 2024, and the total patients were 79, and out of those, we excluded the retreats, and the patient included was 61 in total. The data was mainly collected from ARIA, that is the EPR at St. Luke's, and Biominis for the measuring of thyroglobulin levels for follow-ups. So risk stratification. So BTA implies that the patient should have their initial risk stratification as per the histology after their surgery. And after that, if we provide the treatment, and post-treatment, the patient would have a dynamic response stratification, that would actually lead the follow-up plan for that patient. And the initial risk assessment included high risk, intermediate, and low risk patients. This was the cohort that I mentioned earlier, and total patients were 61, low grade were 18% of the patients, intermediate were 62%, and high risk patients were 13%, and miscellaneous was 7% because there were lack of pathologies, because the surgeries was done outside the Ireland. Dynamic response. So after providing this treatment, the excellent response was seen in 59% of the patients, indeterminate 34%, and incomplete in 7%. By these definitions, I mean that excellent, there was no clinical parameter of disease recurrence, so is the radiological one. In indeterminate, there was partially high levels of thyroglobulin or some occurrence of disease on the scans, and incomplete had absolutely no effect of this therapy or even had metastatic disease. This is the graphical presentation. So as per BTA guidelines, we should be waiting for at least 3 months from the diagnosis till we deliver this treatment, and which was, again, in adherence to these. The median days were 42 days with the range of 7 to 485. Longer delays was noted in low-risk patients because they can wait for the treatment to be provided to them. And the aim was to give within 3 months. In some UK clinical practice, the range is between 3 months to 6 months. Before giving radioactive iodine to the patient as a part of their treatment, we prepare the patients by giving them artificial human recombinant TSH to raise the level of their TSH after that the radioactive iodine is delivered. There are two ways to do it: artificially give the TSH, or sometimes we withdraw from levothyroxine. As per my data, 92% of the patients had their adequate levels to proceed with this treatment, and 95% of those achieved it with recombinant TSH. So the strengths and limitations. So the data was highly aligned with the BTA guidelines, and good preparations was required, favorable early outcomes, but there were a little setbacks: incomplete histology, poor documentation while sitting in an MDM, and poor surgery date capture. So what are we going to do ahead? The implementation of standardized referral pathways and improve MDT documentation, responders, that how important the part of MDT documentation is, and monitor and re-audit delays from surgery to radioactive iodine administration, and deliver the targeted guideline education with post-audit feedback to the teams. So the take-home message is radioactive iodine is highly effective treatment in patients with DTC, and our data was highly aligned with BTA guidelines as per the risk-adapted use of this treatment, and that showed reassuring outcomes. Thank you.
Thank you, Mariam. Any questions? Guhan.
You said you looked at the timing of radioactive iodine administration in relation to surgery, and you identified some delays. What was the main reasons that you found were delaying the administration? Yeah.
Some of the factors included a bit of logistic things. It's a very small hospital with only 2 suites of radioactive iodine. So the nuclear medicine departments and the shortage of staff was one of the most important factors. And number 2 is the non-compliance of patients. Sometimes patients wanted to delay the treatment. And the third thing was when patients here, sometimes they get medically unfit for the treatment. So this was the time interval that we noted. Most of these factors were imperative, like they were the critical factors, I would say, towards the delay of the treatment.
Did you identify any delays in referral from the MDT?
To be honest, I didn't look at that, but most of the data was in concordance to whatever I've presented here. So yeah, there was no such, I have no idea about that.
Okay, great, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mary. Okay, next presenter is Roseanne O'Doherty from Hematology in the Mater. So the single-center Irish experience in myeloproliferative neoplasms in adolescents and young adults.
Thank you, and thanks to Cancer Trials Ireland for the opportunity to present. My name is Roseanne O'Doherty, and I'm the Hematology Clinical Research Fellow in the Mater Hospital. And I'm presenting today on our insights from a single-center Irish experience on myeloproliferative neoplasms in adolescents and young adults. So just a little bit of background. So myeloproliferative neoplasms are clonal hematopoietic disorders, and they're driven by these acquired genetic mutations, so JAK2, CALR, and MIPL. And this results in excess blood cell production, which leads to complications that can include thrombotic events, abnormal bleeding, and transformation to more aggressive disease states like myelofibrosis and acute leukemia. And typically the median age of diagnosis is in the 6th decade, but it can occur in a younger population. And so AYAs with MPNs demonstrate a unique pattern of driver mutations and thrombotic events, and they also remain at risk of progression to these more aggressive disease states. Evidence-based guidelines for this patient population are very much lacking, and all of our current treatment standards are largely extrapolated just from our older cohorts. And so in this review, we're presenting a comprehensive retrospective review of the clinical features, the disease course, and management of AYA patients with MPN seen at our institution. So it's a retrospective chart review of MPN patients, so they were all diagnosed based on the WHO criteria, between age groups of 16 to 39, which is the NCCN definition of AYA with cancer. And they were diagnosed in the Mater Hospital between 2006 and 2023. So we had a population of 28 AYA MPN patients. Obviously, this is an incredibly rare disease. There was a median follow-up of 6.5 years, but up to 15 years. And the median age at diagnosis was 31, ranging between 18 and 38, with a female preponderance. There was a majority of cases were of essential thrombocytosis, but there were 2 cases of polycythemia vera. And the most common driver mutation detected was JAK2, but there was a significant proportion of patients diagnosed with CALOR mutation of 32%. In terms of how these people presented, the vast majority were an incidental finding of thrombocytosis, but there were 5 thrombotic events, and all of those thrombotic events occurred in patients with JAK2 mutations. 4 of those had arterial thrombotic events, and 1 had a venous event. And then 1 patient presented with abnormal bleeding and was found to have acquired von Willebrand syndrome. And post-diagnosis, there were 3 subsequent events of acquired von Willebrand syndrome, and all of these presented in the context of extreme thrombocytosis, so those with platelet counts of above 1,000, and they all had CALOR mutations. So in terms of looking at the treatment patterns, so typically the indication for treatments for patients with MPNs would be high-risk patients, so over the age of 60, or those that have a thrombotic event. But you can actually see in our population, a very large number of patients required cytoreductive therapy. And so that was 85% of those that had treatment information available. And the indications for treatment, actually the primary indication was symptom burden. So 43% were started on treatment for their symptom burden. The other indications were thrombosis and the extreme thrombocytosis. And in terms of, you can see the lines of therapy, so the majority required 1 line of therapy, 15, but there was a number of patients, 6 patients required 2 lines of therapy, and 2 patients required 3 lines of therapy. And in terms of the types of therapy, that kind of reflected the treatments that were given at the time. So it included hydrea, interferon, anagrelide, and ruxolitinib. In terms of the outcomes, so outcomes for these patients are generally excellent, but 2 patients had transformed to myelofibrosis. Both occurred in the context of JAK2 mutations, and all patients were alive when we did the review. So in terms of just looking at conclusions, AYA patients have unique characteristics, and this differentiates them from the older MPN cohorts. And our data highlights the female preponderance, the high incidence of CALOR mutations, and the increased burden of symptoms for these patients, which is particularly significant due to the impact that it can have on their quality of life. And considering the fact that the life expectancy is close to normal, they're likely to live a very long time with their disease. So specific AYA MPN-directed risk stratification and therapeutic guidelines are necessary so that we can inform age-appropriate and holistic patient care. I'd like to thank the Haematology Department in the Mater for their help with the project, and I'm happy to take any questions.
Thanks, Roseanne. Any questions in the audience? With regards to your conclusions, is there much international data sets looking at...
There was a publication from the UK in 2024 that kind of tried to gather this information together, and our information is broadly in line with that. But in terms of producing age-appropriate guidelines, none of that has really been started yet. We're very much in the infancy of it.
And when it comes to etiology, do you think these are...
So I'm an MD student in the Mater. I've just closed a study called the Mosaic Study, which is a case control study looking at the etiology of MPNs in general across the UK and Ireland. And we had 10% of those patients, so it's over 660 patients, and 10% of those are AYA. So we'll be looking at the differences between the etiology of AYA versus older, because it's likely to be different.
Okay, great. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Okay, next presenter is Caroline O'Leary from Medical Oncology in James's, and she's going to be talking on outcomes in colorectal tumors treated with immune checkpoint inhibitors.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for having me here today. I'm Caroline O'Leary. I'm currently an oncology SPR in Vincent's Hospital. Today I'm presenting data that I've been working on with St. James's Hospital, which is also a national database which includes St. Vincent's Hospital. So we know that loss of one or heterodimer of mismatch repair proteins leads to a deficient mismatch repair cancer. These are approximately 15% in a colon cohort and 5% in a rectal cohort. We know from previous studies that in the colorectal status that these patients do not respond as well to traditional chemotherapy as a proficient MMR patient. However, due to some groundbreaking studies, we know that these patients tend to have an excellent response to immune checkpoint blockade and can often achieve a complete pathological response with immune checkpoint blockade alone. Due to these studies, dostarlimab is now recommended as first line for deficient MMR rectal cancer in localized state and in the metastatic state in either mono or dual immune checkpoint blockade for deficient MMR colon cancer. So our study aimed to look at national data across Ireland in the locally advanced non-resectable deficient MMR rectal and colon cancers. So far we've contacted 9 sites. Today we'll be presenting data from 6 of them. Patients were sourced locally through the MDT or chart reviews. They were considered eligible if they had a histologically confirmed deficient MMR rectal or colon cancer, which was considered upfront non-resectable and had received at least 1 cycle of ICB. Following the initial immunohistochemistry analysis, patients were referred for further testing dependent on the pattern of IHC loss. If they were MLH1 PMS2 loss, they had further BRCA and MLH1 methylation testing. If either of those were positive, they were considered sporadic, though if they had a significant family history, they were still referred for genetic testing. If both of those were negative, they were also referred for genetic testing, and any other patterns of IHC loss were also referred for germline testing for Lynch syndrome. This is just an overview of the demographics of our patients to date. So far, we've collected 26 colon and 12 rectal patients. As you can see, there's quite a wide range of ages, relatively evenly distributed among various sites, treatments, and due to pre-existing treatment regimes, several patients did receive traditional chemotherapy or chemoradiation, either pre or post their ICB. This is just a pattern of the IHC loss to date. As we would expect, there's a predominance of MLH1 PMS2, although the rectal cohorts are much more heterogeneous than the colon cohorts, which we would expect from pre-existing data. For the germline results, there's a slight predominance of sporadic versus germline in the colon cohort, though there's still several germline tests outstanding at this time. So our outcomes to date, 5 of the rectal patients have completed their treatment, 3 proceeded to surgery, and all had a complete pathological response at surgery. 2 have proceeded to surveillance, and there's no evidence of recurrence on that. The 2 patients who proceeded to surveillance had complete responses on radiology and endoscopic assessment, though you'll note there isn't a concordance of radiological, endoscopic, and pathological response in the patients so far. In the colon cohort, 13 patients have completed treatment, 11 proceeded to surgery, with the vast majority of those achieving complete pathological response. And again, you'll note there isn't a complete concordance between radiological, endoscopic, and pathological response, although a number of our endoscopic results are still outstanding, as it wasn't initially captured in our first data collection. Toxicity is in line with what we would expect from previous studies. A vast majority of patients with grade 1 to 3 toxicity were successfully rechallenged after medical treatment. 6 patients passed away, none due to immune toxicity, though 1 patient did develop triple M syndrome after 1 cycle of ICB and subsequently passed away due to progression of disease. So in conclusion, of the 14 patients who have proceeded to surgery to date, 93% had a major pathological response and 78% a complete pathological response with immune checkpoint blockade alone, with no evidence of recurrence on surveillance. There are still a number of questions to be asked, including ideal duration of treatment and specifically the selection of patients who are suitable for operative versus non-operative treatment, as well as duration of surveillance. I'd like to thank everybody at all the various sites who were involved in collecting this data, because it has been slightly arduous at times. Many thanks in particular to Dr. Harold, who believed very strongly in this all the way along. And if anybody does have any patients they think would be appropriate for inclusion in our database, we would love to have them. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Caroline. Any questions for Caroline? I have a question here.
Caroline, that is wonderful. It's really difficult to get all of these players on board, so that's brilliant. My question is, are you planning to look in the surveillance group to do some more follow-up? Are you going to look at this again in maybe 2 or 3 years and continue to look at these patients that you're now going to have in your study?
Absolutely. I think initially when we just designed the initial collection key, the aim was to kind of capture a snapshot at the time, but because of the changes around ICB treatment in this cohort progressing so quickly, it's really become much more of a living database now, and it's why we're actually having to do a second round of data collection at the moment, because as we've done this for recent presentations, we've noticed holes in the data that we want to update, but particularly duration of surveillance we're planning on going ahead. I suppose one of the biggest questions from this is which patients are suitable for operative versus non-operative treatment. If you, let's say, have a high colon cancer, surgery does not carry the morbidity that a low rectal cancer does, and if these patients could escape surgery and the long-term effects of that, selecting those patients who'd be suitable to that would be really important going forward.
Okay, thank you so much, Caroline.
Thank you. Our next presenter is Mary O'Reilly from Medical Oncology, who's going to be talking on proteomic analysis for early onset colorectal cancer.
Good morning. My name is Mary O'Reilly. I'm an oncology registrar in St. Vincent's Hospital, and I'm delighted to be here today presenting some of the data from my PhD project, which I've recently completed. That was entitled Multi-omic Profiling of Early Onset Colorectal Cancer. So similar to Oana, on commencing this research project, we saw that worldwide incidence of early onset colorectal cancer, or colorectal cancer in those less than 50 years of age, was increasing, but we didn't have the data from an Irish context. So we also spoke to the NCRI and we got the Irish data, and we found that between 1994 and 2021, colorectal cancer in Ireland in those less than 50 years of age had increased by 1/3, and this was largely driven by those aged 20 to 34, where the incidence had actually increased by 66%. Over the same time period, we saw that the incidence of colorectal cancer in those older than 50 years of age had actually decreased by around 12%. So the hypothesis of our project was that early onset colorectal cancer is a distinct molecular and clinical entity compared to later onset colorectal cancer. We set out to compare the molecular profiles of the two cohorts using genomics, transcriptomics, and proteomic analysis. So our study group was those less than 50 years of age with a diagnosis of colorectal cancer adenocarcinoma. They were stage 1 to 3, surgically resected, and they were all microsatellite stable. There was 38 in the study group and 41 patients in the control group, which is the exact same characteristics except they were greater than 50 years of age. We collected the clinical, pathological, and therapeutic data. Anyone with a hereditary cancer or a previous malignancy was excluded. So the results. These sunburst plots show our somatic mutation changes. Plot A is the early onset cohort and plot B is the later onset cohort. We found 50% of both groups had targeted mutations present, and we didn't see a statistically significant difference between the two cohorts, but we did find that the early onset group had a broader range of mutations. This is the same results, but it's showing the actionability of our mutations. So we used the OncoPlot, which is the actionability score from Memorial Sloan Kettering, to show how these mutations could impact our patients. So the blue mutations are tier 1 mutations, which have an FDA-approved biomarker and an FDA-approved drug to target these biomarkers. Moving on to our proteomic analysis, we ran the proteomics in 4 individual batches, and we're delighted to see a fairly high rate of consistency between the 4 batches. We found 6,000 protein IDs, and importantly, we saw that the makeup of normal and tumour samples are distinct. Interestingly, when we looked at the different cohorts, we can see the PCA for tumour sidedness, sex, and stage 1, 2 versus stage 3 did not show a similar separation. And this was interesting given on the genomic level, tumour sidedness was very, very different. We then performed RNA sequencing, and you can see on this slide that we performed a number of differential expression analysis, and we did see differences between our early onset and our late onset cohort. So to conclude, early onset colorectal cancer is on the rise in Ireland, following the same trends that we see internationally. It is a distinct molecular entity compared to the late onset cohort, with unique transcriptomic and proteomic profiles. The mutation profile of our early onset cohort revealed a lower repertoire of KRAS mutations compared to the later onset, but a broader number of overall variants. And we do have, similar to, in general, the AYA and the early onset, we do have specific therapeutic and survivorship considerations for this really important cohort. Great, thank you very much.
Thanks, Mary. We'll take questions for Mary. Can you tell us about future directions for your work?
Yeah, so there is, I should have said I carried out this lab research in Systems Biology Ireland, and there is ongoing research there through further grant Precision Oncology Ireland 2. I suppose what I would like to see in the future is, any patient with early onset colorectal cancer that's diagnosed in Ireland goes into a pilot study where you automatically opt in for, blood, feces, tumour, and adjacent normal tissue, and I suppose we have a large
Prospective
database.
Exactly. We have a question here.
You've got a great lot of information now. What do we do about it? Can you use it as a preventative strategy, or does it inform our therapeutic strategy?
Yeah, so I think firstly to inform our therapy. So when we started this project, when we were looking at the genomic profiling of our stage 1 to stage 3 cohort, we were kind of thinking, is there any benefit in doing this? Because at the moment, we don't give adjuvant-directed therapies. However, in that time, just last year, in the New England Journal of Medicine, there's now evidence for using aspirin in the stage 2 and stage 3 PIK3CA mutant cancers. So even in that short period of time, our information does make a difference. So I think to answer your question in a long way, I think, first of all, to figure out why this is happening, but second of all, to come up with better treatment strategies with lower toxicity.
Okay, thank you, Mary.
Thanks.
Our next speaker is Lauren Poole. She's going to be presenting on outcomes and toxicity following SRS for brain mets.
Thank you so much for the opportunity to present today. My name is Lauren Poole, and I'm a registrar in radiation oncology at CUH. We conducted an audit examining local control rates at 3 and 6 months following SRS to cavity as well as intact brain metastases, and I'm very pleased to share our results today. I'd like to extend a very sincere thank you to Dr. Michal O'Cachal as well as Ola for their support. So brain metastases can occur in up to 40% of patients with cancer, contributing significantly to morbidity and mortality. While multiple treatment options do exist, today we'll be focusing on stereotactic radiosurgery. SRS is a non-surgical intervention that delivers a very high dose of precisely focused radiation to a well-defined target. It provides excellent local control, offers a survival benefit, and can also lead to symptom improvement. It unfortunately does come with some side effects, but I suppose radionecrosis would be that of clinical significance. The reason why we're focusing on this today is that SRS was introduced to CUH in September 2024, prompting the need for local auditing. Now, most published SRS studies focus on 1-year local control with limited reporting of early outcomes at 3 and 6 months. For this reason, we selected this article by Funshi et al. As our reference standard, as their study does report early post-SRS radiographic changes by tumor type. And you can see the results there in the table on the right. Of note, the radionecrosis rates were 14% at 12 months. We then went on to collect our own institutional data from electronic health records between September 2024 and July 2025. This timeframe was chosen to allow at least 3 months of MRI follow-up after SRS. Over this 10-month period, you'll see that we treated 33 lesions, which encompassed 26 patients. Of these, 21 were intact brain metastases and 12 were post-operative cavities. We also further reported patient age, primary histology, fractionation, margins, as well as tumor size. Of the 33 lesions that were treated, 81% of them had a 3-month follow-up MRI, and 88% of those eligible for a 6-month follow-up underwent imaging. The reason for incomplete follow-up included progression of intracranial disease outside of our treatment area, extracranial disease progression, comorbidities, and transfer of follow-up to other services. Among the lesions that had follow-up imaging, no local progression was observed at the treatment sites at 3 and 6 months, which corresponds to a local control rate of 100% irrespective of the primary tumor. However, if you have a look at I've titled it pseudo-progression versus radionecrosis because it's a little hard to tell at this stage, but at 6 months, this was 25%. Now, when we compare this to our predetermined standards of von Schiettel, we exceeded expectations in local control rates regardless of the tumor site, but our radionecrosis rate could potentially be higher. Ours was 25% at 6 months, and they reported 14% at 1 year. So how do we go about implementing change? To inform future practice, we propose the following: careful patient selection for SRS, delivery of appropriate dose, fractionation, and margins tailored to tumor size, encourage multidisciplinary team input, and with regards to radionecrosis, we recognize that the 6-month MRI finding can be very challenging to interpret. These outcomes should therefore be reassessed at 12 months, ideally within a center with specialist neuroradiology expertise to provide a clearer and more accurate assessment. To complete the audit cycle, we will re-audit in 1 year. These are my references. Any questions?
Thanks, Lauren. We take any questions for Lauren? Jerry? Oh, we've got somebody in the back, actually.
Lovely presentation, Lauren. I just had 2 questions, actually. Is it just single brain metastases that you're currently treating in CUH, or were there multiple metastases treated?
We can treat multiple sites at the moment. We sort of have a flow diagram that we use to decide sort of the total capacity that we're able to treat, but it's not just one single site, it can be more.
Okay. And just the second question, the MRIs at 6 months, are they reviewed in an MDT setting? Because like you said, it's quite difficult to identify if it's radiation effect or radionecrosis.
And I think that's a really important question. At this stage, from my understanding, they aren't. And I think that that would provide quite a lot of input into what we're actually looking at and provide a bit of valuable information as to what we should be doing with it based on that information. I think that's important.
Thank you.
In those cases who had radionecrosis, did you go back and look at the plans and look at the dose volume histograms and say, have they any particular characteristics that put them at increased risk?
So we haven't done so as yet. I suppose the plan at this stage is sequential MRI follow-up to see how this disease progresses and behaves. And if it is confirmed radionecrosis, we will look to do that.
Thank you, Lauren.
Our next presenter is Dr. Monzer Saleh from Radiation Oncology in St. Luke's. He's going to be reporting on toxicity of breast radiotherapy with concomitant CMF.
Good morning, everybody. Thank you for the opportunity and thank you for being here. My name is Monzer Saleh. I'm a radiation oncology registrar in St. Luke's. I'm going to present a research about the toxicity of local region radiotherapy and concomitant CMF chemotherapy. No, concomitant CMF chemotherapy is an option in early-stage breast cancer with acceptable toxicity. We have less data available on its use with local regional nodal radiotherapy. The objective was to assess and compare toxicity in patients with breast cancer receiving concomitant versus sequential CMF with radiotherapy. We included patients with biopsy-proven breast radiotherapy who underwent curative surgery and adjuvant radiotherapy with CMF chemotherapy. We looked at the acute and late side effects, dermatitis, fatigue, and pneumonitis, and we recorded the worst grade of each side effect according to the NCI CTAE version 4. It was a retrospective at St. Luke's. Patients were treated between January 2019 and June 2020. Now, the patient characteristics, we had 59 patients divided into two groups. The concomitant patient group were 33 patients and the sequential were 26. The median age was lower in the concomitant group. It was 63 versus 72.7 in the sequential. The predominant histopathology was invasive ductal carcinoma. Mastectomy was the most frequent surgical approach, and staging stage 2A was the commonest, followed by stage 3A. Regarding the radiotherapy characteristics, the breast chest wall radiotherapy only was delivered in 33.3% in the concomitant group versus 42.3% in the sequential group. Nodal radiation was given in 66.6% in the concomitant group versus 57.5% in the sequential, and the commonest fractionation was 40 Gray in 15 fractions. Boost radiotherapy was administered more frequently in the sequential group, 53.8% versus 30.3%, and the commonest boost fractionation was 11.25 Gray in 5 fractions. Regarding the nodal targets, supraclavicular and undissected axilla was the commonest nodal target in both groups, 42.4 in the concomitant and 23.1 in the sequential. IMNs were added in 21.2 in the concomitant group and 23% in the sequential. Regarding the side effects, majority in both groups had grade 1 dermatitis, 65.4% in the sequential and 54.3% in the concomitant. Grade 2 dermatitis was observed in 30.3% in the concomitant versus 23.1% in the sequential, but the p-value was not significant, it was just 0.5. Regarding the fatigue, most patients had mild to moderate fatigue, 65.4% in the sequential group and 51.5% in the concomitant group. And grade 2 fatigue only occurred in the concomitant group with affecting 21.2% of patients, and the p-value was 0.04. No patients had pneumonitis as a late side effects. So the sequencing of radiotherapy and chemotherapy remains controversial. Our study demonstrates that concomitant CMF can be administered safely in patients receiving breast, chest wall, and nodal radiotherapy. These findings are consistent with previous reports, although most of the earlier studies did not include nodal irradiation. So those 4 in the top did not include nodal irradiation. And then the latter 3, we have Sarvan et al. It was conducted many years ago, and it might not reflect modern radiotherapy techniques. Fietz et al. Was done in the late 1990s. It had 51 patients who got concomitant CMF, but only 23 of those had nodal radiotherapy, and they had no sequential group to compare to. And Ismaili et al. Had 134 patients. Most of them had chest wall and nodal radiotherapy between January and December 2001 and 2002. So it had a much larger cohort with a longer follow-up date, but they use cobalt in the treatment, which is not used in the modern techniques. So limitations, I'm sorry, that is too small. It was a retrospective study. We had a limited number of patients, and we only documented 3 side effects, as those were the ones who were clearly documented and graded. Future trials and future studies will still be needed to have more information. So this analysis revealed higher grades of fatigue in the concomitant group and no significant difference in incidence in the dermatitis group and, of course, in the pneumonitis. So it is safe, we can say that these findings suggest that concomitant CMF and radiotherapy has an acceptable toxicity profile, and it is an attractive option for patients to shorten the total treatment time. Thank you.
Any questions in the audience? Are there certain patients you might think of selecting sequential treatment for over concomitant treatment?
So most of the patients were elderly and they tolerated treatment well. So I would say unless they are taking their chemotherapy in a place that's very far from the radiotherapy center, maybe those patients would not be suitable for concomitant treatment. Otherwise, I don't think there would be like a specific group, but more number of patients will show us.
Okay.
In those who had toxicity in patients who had concomitant chemo-RT, was there a correlation in the cycle at which they started the radiation?
So I don't have that number exactly, but most patients started between 2 and 3, and almost all of them had their radiotherapy between 2 and 3. There was few patients who had it after the third cycle, but most of those patients were between cycle 2 and 3.
Okay, right. Thanks.
Okay, great. Thank you very
Thanks,
much.
Monza.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, our next presenter is Alice Talbot from St. James's, MedOnc, who's going to be talking on emerging trends of early onset colorectal cancer.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you very much for the opportunity to speak today. My name is Alice Talbot. I'm one of the medical oncology SPRs currently working in Waterford, and this is a study from St. James's on the emerging trends of early onset colorectal cancer in our cohort. Colorectal cancer is no longer a disease of older age, and as Mary mentioned previously, globally the incidence is rising, and particularly in Ireland, the incidence has doubled in the last 20 years. This incidence rate is rising in the early onset group despite a decline in the incidence in the average onset cohort, or those greater than 65 years. The cause of this incidence remains unclear. The recent literature would suggest that there is some interplay between environmental and lifestyle factors, and this may include early insult to the gut microbiome with antibiotic use, or the increasing rates of obesity in the Western diet. There is higher rates of hereditary cancers in this group, but it still only accounts for about 20% of the early onset cohort. We know that early onset colorectal cancer unfortunately presents later than average onset, and when they do present later, they tend to do worse. So we need to look at how colorectal cancer is diagnosed in Ireland. These patients that are less than 50 years old do not currently they do not have access to screening in Ireland, as the age starts at 58. And so many patients present to their GPs. In order to be diagnosed and directly referred for endoscopy at the moment, for a patient in the early onset group, they would have to have persistent symptoms, multiple persistent symptoms for over 6 weeks, or have a family history, which is often not the case. So we looked at all our patients identified over a 5-year period in James's with colorectal cancer diagnosed at age less than 50. We captured a number of different data points, including treatment, but for the purpose of today's talk, I'm going to focus on demographics, clinical data, tumour characteristics, and risk factor profile. So we identified 65 patients with early onset colorectal cancer. The median age was 45. There was a slight female preponderance with 35 females and 30 males. 72% of our patients only reported one symptom at the time of diagnosis. The most common symptom was rectal bleeding. And as I mentioned previously, these patients would not qualify for direct endoscopic surveillance. 6 presented in emergency, either bowel obstruction or bowel perforation, and these were all stage 3 or 4 at diagnosis. The majority of our cases were left-sided tumours, 86%, and unfortunately we see here at diagnosis 67% of patients were stage 3 or 4 disease, highlighting the need for early recognition of the symptoms in this group. Unsurprisingly, the majority of patients, 78%, had moderately differentiated disease, 91% were adenocarcinomas, with a small number of mucinous and signet ring carcinomas. So looking at their IHC and molecular analysis, there was only 8 MMR deficient tumours, and 3 of these were subsequently confirmed to have Lynch syndrome. There were no BRAF mutated tumours, and there was 14 KRAS mutated tumours. Only 29% of patients in this group had genetic testing. So apart from the 3 Lynch confirmed colorectal cancers, there was 1 APC pathogenic variant found and 1 ATM mutation. There was also 2 variants of unknown significance. So looking at the risk factors, the common risk factors that we know are associated with colorectal cancer were not seen in this cohort. So most patients had only occasional or rare alcohol use, had no smoking history, and had a BMI less than 30. So the median BMI in this group was 27. And of note, in particularly, 71% of patients had no family history at all at the time that they presented with their colorectal disease. As I mentioned, I won't go into detail on the treatment today, but just one point that I wanted to focus on that's important for this group is that only 11% had documented fertility discussions or referral to a fertility centre. And in order to combat such statistics, the Young Onset Cancer Programme has been recently set up in St. James's and the Trinity Centre and has dedicated A&Ps in sexual health, fertility, survivorship and well-being. So a few take-home points. From our group, as I said, most were left-sided and unfortunately 67% presented with late-stage disease. Majority of these patients had minimal symptoms and would not qualify currently for direct endoscopic review, and we know there's no screening for these patients in Ireland at the moment. The classical risk factors for colorectal cancer was not displayed in this cohort, and fertility discussions were infrequently referred and documented. 71% had no family history, and genetic testing rates were low, bearing in mind this was a study that was between 2015 and 2020 and likely has higher rates at the moment. So in conclusion, I think there is huge potential for positive change in this cohort, and that is unfortunately ever expanding. Thank you very much for the opportunity, and thank you to all my co-authors, in particular Dr. Harold, who led the study.
Thanks, Alice. Any questions from the audience? I have a question over here.
Yeah, so like with all the data today and all the talks, like there are differences between male and female with the chemotherapy doses and the radiotherapy. And in colorectal cancer also, there is more side effects with female and toxicity, and the difference between one, be it male, female on right and left hand sided of its presentation. So yeah, it's I just feel that's so important.
I agree.
Okay, in the interest of time, we might move on. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Our next presenter is Dr. Ashwini Titavella, who's from surgery in the Mercy, whose topic is a late presentation of metastatic prostate cancer.
Morning, everyone. My name is Ashwini Titavella. I'm a urology SHO in the Mercy down in Cork, and this is our presentation of a late presentation of metastatic prostate cancer with the rare oncocytic component. So prostate cancer does have some known histological variants that have prognostic and therapeutic implications. However, an oncocytic variant is extremely rare. This is the first case noted in Ireland, with only 4 previous cases noted globally. Consequently, there is limited data on prognosis and disease behavior. This brings us to our patient, who is a 66-year-old gentleman who self-presented to the emergency department with high-pressure chronic urinary retention on a background history of worsening lower urinary tract symptoms and nocturnal enuresis. A 5-litre residual volume was noted following urethral catheterization. Subsequent decompression hematuria and post-obstructive diuresis was noted, which required close inpatient monitoring. Once the patient was stable, he was counseled in regards to a transurethral resection of his prostate, and at time of TURP, a digital rectal exam demonstrated a malignant feeling prostate, suggestive of T3 disease. An index PSA level was 14, and histology from TURP demonstrated Gleason 9 prostate adenocarcinoma with an oncocytic variant. Radiological staging studies demonstrated extensive nodal disease and with involving lymph nodes and bones. Following MDT discussion, the patient was commenced on ADT with bicalutamide and leuprolin. Docetaxel chemotherapy was also commenced, and darolutamide alongside the Arisons trial. Most recently, his PSA level is 0.2, and a CT TAP from October demonstrated treatment response across all sites of disease. Oncocytic tumors are characterized by granular eosinophilic cytoplasm with abundant mitochondria. There is a thought that the mitochondria undergo abnormal form, suggestive of oxidative stress. The first image in the top right demonstrates poorly differentiated adenocarcinoma with oncocytic changes and a fused complex architecture which undermines the prostatic urothelium. And the two images on the top left demonstrates occasional papillary structures composed of cells with oncocytic cytoplasms and prominent nucleoli. The bottom image demonstrates that the malignant cells stain diffusely positive for nuclear NKX3.1, which indicates prostatic origin. There are very few reports of prostate adenocarcinoma with an oncocytic variant, and there's a possible correlation with high-grade disease, but all this evidence is largely anecdotal with only 4 cases previously reported. Consequently, guidance on prognostication is limited. This case is notable for its advanced stage at presentation and the high-grade histology with extensive metastatic disease, and it highlights the importance of recognizing rare histological variants in order to improve their clinical behavior. Thanks so much.
Thanks, Dr. Uni. Any questions in the audience? Just down the back here, I think. We have a microphone.
Thank you so much. Just wondering, is there any plans to further on for that patient to perform NGS or any systemic testing?
I'm not too sure. Sorry.
Be interesting.
Yeah. Thank you.
Thanks, Ashwini.
Thank you. Okay, last presenter is Dr. Omar Totonji from Galway, who's going to be talking on exploring the use of AI and large language models in medical oncology.
So good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for coming today. Long presentation, everyone, and thank you for all the effort and the hard work. I'll try to be as brief as possible. So to start, Omar is my name. I'm one of the oncology SHO at Galway University Hospital, and I'm honored to present my paper about exploring the use of artificial intelligence in oncology in Ireland, a national survey. So to start, artificial intelligence represents a major paradigm shift in the modern healthcare system by enabling rapid access to general knowledge, synthesizing efficient information, along with providing context-specific data to support our work. The core strength of it lies in its ability to analyze, interpret, and come with conclusive results of large volume of structured and unstructured data to support our thesis, and whether that's including clinical notes, clinical imaging finding, or pathology result. These capabilities are essentially important in oncology, a specialty characterized by complex multimodal data and rapidly evolving evidence. So there have been different research that address the kind of potential use and integration of AI into medicine. Some addresses the basic medical knowledge of AI, others targeting the administrative role of it, and the rest was kind of focusing on the clinical use of it and the research. So the objective of my study was to assess the current use of AI by the healthcare professional in oncology in Ireland, and how that could impact the future use of it. The current application of use of AI in the oncology care currently, along with some of the concerns surrounding its use. Going forward, so it was a cross-sectional anonymous online survey, and the responses were analyzed using descriptive statistics. So in total, we get 61 respondents, and we could see from the left-sided picture, these are the different hospitals that the respondents were from. And on the right side, we could see that the majority of the respondents were consultant with around 36%. Moving forward, the majority of the participants did reported that they use AI in their clinical or the academic work, around 72% of them. And the cited use of application was kind of various between clinical knowledge, research, or documentation. Going forward, when participants were asked whether they verify the information generated by AI, the majority said yes, and around 45% did report that as well. However, on the other side, we could still see that around 47% from the participant did encounter some error generated by the AI information. That being said, there is still 61% do believe that AI has the potential to enhance their clinical decision skills, and around 71% do believe as well that if it's used appropriately, it could reduce the clinical errors in oncology care. On the other side, we could still see that there are some main concerns among the participants per se, some on the level of medicological responsibilities, patient protection, documentation, and confidentiality. However, 79% of the participants, did show interest in a structural training provided by the HSE to integrate the AI into the clinical work. That all drove up to the conclusion that AI still requires a responsible integration for improved oncology care in Ireland. It's embedded in the system, it's being used by the oncology healthcare professional, and they view it positively as a supportive tool, not as a substitute, but rather there are still some concerns when that would show all the need for national guidance, education, more governance, so we could provide AI integrated in the system and improve the oncology care that we provide to our patients in Ireland. Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, Omar. Any questions for Omar? I'm a bit scared to see that some people don't check the data on AI. How do you think that we can educate people about it? I mean, it's hard now. I having used AI myself, I know sometimes that the data that you get isn't accurate, but it's clearly becoming more important that we educate ourselves about how to use these tools. How can we actually do that?
Yeah, exactly. That's a very good question. Actually, this is hopefully going to be like the next cycle of the study that we raised. Is like we're gonna try to advise and advocate for a training through training and spreading more knowledge about the correct use of it. Maybe optimizing more governance of the database that's provided, and having some more regulation toward it. That could hopefully like pave the way to getting it more in action into the oncology care here.
Okay. Thanks very
Thank
much,
you.
Omar.
Yeah. Okay, so that concludes our NCHT over presentations. Now, another round of applause to all our presenters, please, for all the hard work.